This one. How's that? Jolly good. The light doesn't seem to want to go off that one, but I don't think it's going to cause any problem at all. Thanks, Paul. Let's start again. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this Cabinet meeting. Busy agenda this evening. Not aware that we have any apologies for absence. Does any Cabinet member want to make any declaration of interest for any item coming up on the agenda? No? Okay. Just before we get started and go any further, obviously just to stress, we have a significant number of reports to get through. The Cabinet have all seen these reports as they've been drafted, given their opinion and so on. So quite a lot of discussion has already taken place. Don't be surprised if we don't endlessly discuss them. We have a significant number of public speakers registered, about 2 hours worth of public speakers. If you add that to the introductions of the reports themselves, we will be here for 5-6 hours, something of that sort. So again, it's the usual urge when we have a busy agenda for those speakers to be as concise as possible, please. We want you to have every opportunity to make important points. If we could, may I thank, I noticed that the Lib Dems have come to consensus view on reports and therefore have one speaker coming forward where we can. If you already have a member of your party or with similar views, express your view and you feel that it's covered it, please don't be feel at all bothered if you sort of wave by and say that your points are made. We'll get through as quickly as we can, but we'll make sure we give everybody the chance to make all the important points that they need to make. We have some minutes, which is minutes of previous meeting on the 11th of July. Just ask the Cabinet members if they have any suggestions, amendments or anything of that sort to these minutes. Is everybody happy? Can they be agreed? Is that agreed? Thank you. Thank you. I have no particular chair's announcements to make and not aware of any urgent business having been notified. So we'll get into our first main item of business, which is a report back from Overview and Scrutiny. Very pleased to welcome Councillor Rosie Herring, who's going to introduce this to us first of all. Thank you for joining us, Rosie. Over to you.
Well, I think, Chair, it's actually Stuart Lackenby's report or response to the recommendations that were made, but it's some comments that I have on that report, and obviously I'll take it as read that everybody's seen it. And there were just some comments that I wanted to make, and it's really relating to 5.18. I thank the Council for all the efforts it's made and the recommendations it's taken on board. and the things that the council are doing. But my concern was actually about the Integrated Care Board, which I know we've got representations of, and NHFT. So the thing that stood out for me, and I was trying to get some independent verification for this, that having noted that the CAMS referral rate was 2 years and effectively closed, ICB is now quoting it as 9 weeks, which, you know, big shout of hooray if that's the case. But I find that I'm a bit suspicious and a bit dubious about that figure. To go from 2 years and an effectively closed list to a 9 weeks referral is just so sensational. I wonder whether it's actually founded in fact. And I was trying to get some individual some verification from our local GP surgery, so I'll have to wait now until the next lap when I can actually ask if this is the experience they actually are having. And the other thing that I was concerned about, that they had no intention of aligning any of the services to our laps at the present time. I understand that organisationally this may be difficult, but the concern at the clinician level was that they needed a named person that they could relate to when they needed to chase up cases, and that the workforce was ever changing and they never knew who to deal with and who to relate to. So I would ask them to perhaps reconsider how they might be able to give a named contact for each of the labs. And just in a general matter, I know, for instance, our very own councillor Breeze was at the last governor meeting at NHFT, and they stated there that actually assessments for autism were taking over 2 years and was effectively closed. And I just felt that I didn't get a sense of urgency from NHFT and the Integrated Care Board, which I felt when I heard some very heartrending testimony over many months from the people who were actually involved and using the service. In fact, to be fair, NHFT didn't even mention CAMS in their annual report, their annual programme for this year of action. So I just want to ask the Cabinet to ask its officers to keep a very close eye on this and try and inject that sense of urgency that I heard from the people who are trying to use the service, and make sure it doesn't go on the too hard to deal with pile. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Rosie. Our next speaker on this item is Councillor Emma Roberts. Emma, welcome.
Thank you, Chair. I would agree with everything that Councillor Herring has just said in respect to this report. So thank you for that, Rosie. At 5.16 of the report, it states that the ICB wasn't engaged in the process. And I just wondered why. It doesn't say whether they were asked to contribute or not. There's no detail of whether they contributed behind the scenes. There's no information, but they seem to make the point that they weren't. It almost seems that they're a little bit annoyed about that fact. 5.18, I'm really disappointed that that's been rejected without reference back or any relevant communication with the LAPs to pass comment on that. Thought that was the whole point of our local area partnerships. I'm disappointed as well that where the ICB have said that it's not their responsibility, so a particular thing isn't their commissioning responsibility, that there isn't a recommendation to Cabinet for the responsible body to take on the action. So an example at 5.22, it's clear that the responsibility of the recommendation falls with public health. Instead of what appears to be dismissing that recommendation, we could very easily insert the terms public health in to replace the ICB, and we could move forward with that recommendation. So I would really ask that the Cabinet look to do that as part of their report this evening. It'd be really straightforward to do. we're not saying that public health are going to then deliver that, but we're going to get them to investigate. When it's particularly around the issue of school nursing and mental health within schools, I think it could have a direct impact on early intervention services. So I'd ask that that's considered this evening. And any parts of the report where the ICB are not the right party, I believe that work should have been allocated to the right party to do, and then we could have proceeded with the recommendations. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Emma. Some good points. And final speaker, and we'll come back on some of these points then, is Councillor Humphreys. Rosie, welcome.
Thank you. I support what the two other speakers have said, in particular the considering allocation of school nurses, which would be invaluable, and the need for verification of the drop in waiting time for 9 weeks. And really just to echo Councillor Herring's point that in many ways there doesn't seem the necessary sense of urgency with some of the implementation of these recommendations. Recommendation 1, for example, additional resources being taken for topsizing the school budget. Now, this scrutiny review came to Cabinet in March, and this matter's not going to the school forum now till next month. So, you know, one wonders if there must have been a school forum between March and October, but maybe not. But anyway, there's a period of some months. Recommendation 2, making case to government. Obviously, that's a long-term issue. Maybe not. But again, the F40 group, could that not have gone to them a bit sooner? And recommendation 3, developing a youth strategy. It'd been useful to have a time scale for when that's going to be completed. So it'd just be good to see a bit more momentum in this absolutely crucial issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosie. Thank you very much. I think some of those comments we can then come back to. Stuart, would you like to pick some up? Thank you.
Yes. So I'll just work through the comments that are attached to this report. So in producing this report, I engaged with the ICB. I looked at our internal services. From an ICB perspective, the ICB perceived that NHFT were actively involved in the task and finish group, but that as the CCG as they were then, they weren't actively engaged in the approach. Which is why they asked that we included that within the report as part of their response. What I can say is that child and adolescent mental health is a recognised priority for the ICB, but I do appreciate that there is a significant shift from having a reported 2.5-year waiting list through to 9 weeks, and we can write to the ICB to ask for validation of that. As the report suggests, we also need to track the progress around CAMS. Okay. We need to track the progress of that through the health and wellbeing. Third time lucky. In relation to the schools forum, getting this in front of the schools forum, this was the first opportunity we had to take that forward. Previous agendas were full. In relation to the F40 group are already prioritising work on both SEND and CAMS. So our local reflections are adding to that approach. I think it's fair to say that on a national footing, CAMS isn't where we would want it to be. There are considerable demands that we've seen come through and emerge, not just during and after the pandemic, but actually there was a residual level of demand that was really starting to ramp up prior to the pandemic. It would be fair to say that across the country and locally, there is a recognition that there has to be an increased priority around CAMHS, or else the consequential impact for young people is going to be quite significant. It is also going to create massive amounts of future demand for mental health services. So I note the questions that have been put forward, and I'm happy to respond in more detail if that's okay.
Thanks, Stuart. And Matt, do you want to chip in?
Yeah, just to recognise the points made by the speakers. This is obviously a critical area, isn't it, for children and young people. I put this in the context of what I know my nephews and nieces and my own kids have been through the pandemic, and you know, it's been a huge challenge for them. So I'm very happy to ramp the sort of profile of this up through the Health and Wellbeing Board and make sure we do scrutiny the justice of, you know, the work that you guys have put into this, aside from the point Stuart made as well. So just to thank everybody for the report and their involvement, and I'll speak to Sally about this as well and make sure we can raise the profile and get some reporting back on it a bit more, you know, to a better, more satisfactory level. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Matt. Anything else that anybody would like to add or ask on this one, Cabinet members? No? Okay. Recommendations are, as always, at section 3. Can I ask you to confirm your agreement to the recommendations? Agreed? Thank you. And that takes us on to item 7, which is the corporate plan. Just a few comments from me, and then some of the Cabinet members will mention some of the key parts in their areas of the report. We've then got 4 speakers, Councillors Randall, Purser, Holland-Ellermere and Humphreys. So the way in which we're delivering these figures, we've changed this measure our performance against the corporate plan. What to do is to provide greater, is my sound breaking up? To provide greater transparency. Basically by looking to increase the number of things on which we report. Some things have been dropped, some of the COVID related ones, but largely we've added 27 new performance indicators. And they include things that have been applied to adapt to regulatory changes. So in the last 12 months, several government departments have put in place changes that not only impact how the council is inspected, but also altered national performance indicators. So we need to move with those. There's also providing more in-depth measures for things like adult social care, children's services and educational services. That'll better highlight areas of strength, but also where improvement is required. We continue to report these on a quarterly basis. So this is the first quarter of this year from April to June that's being reported here. We think we've got encouraging process across a lot of different areas. We've also got many things that we need to keep working hard, and through measuring this and transparently putting the information out there, I think hopefully that demonstrates we're not afraid to make those things that are challenging known and what progress we're making. There's a few key highlights worth mentioning. Leisure centres welcomed 568,000 visitors during that quarter, and that's an increase of 24,000 compared to the same period last year. We put a focus on equipping and supporting young adults to continue to live in their own homes and in their own communities. And that means that we've needed to place fewer adults or young adults into care homes than other East Midlands local authorities that we're measured against. So we're pleased with that. Exceeding our target at just 2.3 per 100,000 population. The current number of children on educational, health and care plans, the HCPs, supported by the council is 3,391. And that's an increase of 356 from the same point last year. The volume there and the increasing complexity just provides some insight into how some of the council's challenges exist in that area. We're aware of the challenges. Significant increase in both physical and virtual visits to libraries, over 221 physical visitors, which is fantastic. An improved performance in processing planning applications. We know that planning has been a major weakness. Significant progress has been made, and we're hitting way above the government performance, which is 70% determined within a period. We're hitting figures of 87.5. and non-major of 80% applications. We know that there are still some sticking in the system. Rebecca may say more, and most councillors will still have something on their casework where they've got a sticky one trying to get through. But overall, that machine is working much better, and we're now looking at reducing the period of validations at the front end of the application process. All in all, we believe we completed a successful second year, and we are hopeful that this represents a good start to the current year. That's a few initial comments. Shall we take our speakers next, then I'll ask cabinet members if they want to chip in, both answer those questions that are raised, but also then perhaps highlight any key areas they wish to. So our first speaker on this item is Councillor Randall. Wendy, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. It's quite interesting actually reading all through that, but I've just picked out, I could have picked out lots more, but I've just picked out a few just because I don't understand why. So on the clean and green, there's a reduction of charging points. So we are now well below the English average on that now. And I just wondered why we were taking them out and not replacing them, or are we going to replace them with extra? On the fixed penalty notice for environmental crime, we're 54% less than we were in the last quarter. Wondered if there was a reason why that was. Improved chances. My understanding is that an EHCP should be completed within 20 weeks by law. So then why isn't the target at 100%? And to only achieve 4.8% to me seems a shocking read. And also I'd be interested to know actually how many are waiting for an assessment and how many are out of their 20-week time. 33% on a child protection plan for a second time. What are we doing wrong? Because to put a child through that, put them back into an unsafe home, which it clearly must be to go back on a plan, is absolutely shocking. Then looking at council homes, new council homes built 0. And of affordable homes that we were expecting 171, only 57. So it just seems that our housing list isn't decreasing very rapidly. So they're all my points. Thank you, Chair.
Lovely. Thank you. Thank you very much, Wendy. Bob is next. Councillor Purser.
Thank you, Chair. Welcome the additional indicators. I think that's very welcome, and I think we are making progress. It's taking time, but I think we're beginning to get there in terms of having useful indicators. Although, back to fly tipping, I still don't think the indicators tell us very much. Is the fact that we got fewer incidents, meaning that we got less fly tipping? Because the public perception is not that that is so. And many of our communities are still blighted by fly tipping. Now, I know MPH have changed the way they do their fly tipping, so that might have resulted in changes in the data. So I'm puzzled. And also the reduction in prosecutions, does that mean that we're on top of it, or that we've just had staff on other things? So I think the question, I don't think we're as on top of it as these figures suggest, but I'm willing to be reassured. Thank you. That's great. That's me. That's it.
Thank you. Good points, Bob. Thank you for being concise. Again, Keith is next. Keith's already out of the blocks. That's great. Welcome, Keith.
Just to highlight, it's very concerning to see that the housing benefit application process actually got worse over the last quarter. So it was 36 days against a target of 20. It's now 44 days, nearly 45 days. And the national average should be 22. So we're currently processing new applications of housing benefit at twice the national average, which is pretty poor. I just wanted to check really what IT and staffing times improvements are being put in place to improve that service, because some of the people who would be waiting would be quite concerned and anxious to make sure that their rent is being paid.
Thank you, Keith. That's great. And finally, Councillor Humphreys. Rosie.
Thank you. Just briefly, thank you for this report. There are some encouraging signs, but as you've acknowledged, many areas that a lot more work is required. Encouragement, for example, that fewer 65 plus year olds are going into residential nursing care, and more people, older people, are staying at home 91 days after discharge. I would have found it helpful to know with the metrics that have been added and removed, which have been national ones and which decided by the internal review. I was a bit disappointed, for example, that information on babies being breastfed for up to between 6 and 8 weeks after birth has been removed. I don't know if that's a national thing, but given that the enormous health benefits of breastfeeding, I think that's information that we do need to know, and just having it in there is an indication that that's something that is supported, as of course it is by public health. But going on to planning, it is very encouraging what the speed of the process now with major applications, but I'm assuming that government doesn't require us to indicate our timescales for minor applications. Members were informed at a planning briefing recently that for minor applications, if my note on it is correct, that officers have 80 minor applications on their books when they should have around about 45, which seems a worrying caseload, and that must slow up the process of processing them all. Just on the homelessness statistics, I think there must be an error in, I think it's the second paragraph. It talks about the stats for relief and preventions, and I think it talks about 21% preventions, when I think it's talking about the relief duty being implemented. Just finally, information on the tourism strategy, which is obviously welcome and overdue and desperately needed, but I do hope that well, there's been consultation with stakeholders, the business community, etc. There will be at least a briefing for members on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Rosie. Some good points there. A number of people I know want to come in. Rebecca, did you want to start? Maybe some comments on the planning side. There are performance stats in there, aren't there?
Yes,
For the
there are,
small
yeah.
ones.
So the non-majors, which are sitting at 80% in response to Councillor Humphreys, non-majors are the minors, and that is sitting at 80%. And that is a statistic in the report. On the caseload, that is indeed the case that staff still do have a high caseload. And today we went out to external recruitment on the remaining jobs that are unfilled in the structure chart you will have seen. Once we fill those positions, that will make a major difference to the workload of staff, and that is an ambition. Another ambition, because 80% is not, 80% is, 20% that still aren't being fulfilled in the required timescale, and there are some that are unsatisfactorily old, and that is a focus to get those through, as well as the other focus, which is customer communication, which is really, really important, and I think is improving, and is another very important focus of the planning department. So there's still lots of work to do, but I think we are seeing quite substantial green shoots of recovery coming through.
Brilliant. Thank you, Rebecca. Adam, you want to make some comments?
Yeah, just on the house building numbers, I think unlike some of the targets in the quarterly report, it's simply not the nature of housing delivery that you see consistent performance. There will be fallow periods, and then there will be gluts of delivery. So we continue to work with NPH and other partners to identify brownfield land that can be used for further housing. This morning, you and I, Chairman, and along with officers, went to visit Riverside House, one of our most recent developments. The keys have now been handed over to that particular development, and I think we can be confident that there'll be much more to come in the near future. But as I say, it is one of those areas where you get fallow periods and then gluts of delivery. So it's not a source of undue alarm that we see a zero in any one period. The key thing is that we continue to develop and bolster our pipeline, as indeed we do continue to do.
Yeah, absolutely. It was great to see the Riverside development, really attractive accommodation there. Just remind me how many units, because that will now hit the current quarter's stats, won't it? What was the number of units again?
So 60 have now been delivered,
60.
And there are further 12 in development that will come later in the year or early next year.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. Matt.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to mention, at scrutiny last Thursday, the director took the meeting through their scorecard with regard to adult social care and public health. And there's with adult social care, there's 4 measures that have been removed, 7 new ones put in, public health 3 removed and 8 new ones, all to try and capture what we need to in terms of reporting for things like CQC inspections, etc. Rosie, Councillor Humphreys mentioned breastfeeding, which has been taken out, and I think it's a case of what we do include, and we've got, we can't keep everything in, but I have, while we're sitting here, I'll email Sally Burns and ask just for a bit of an update on the figures around those rates for Councillor Humphreys. But I think we're looking to try and be as transparent as we can. I did mention at the meeting last week that I'm happy to be challenged on the measures that are brought forward around the adults measures, particularly with regards to CQC stuff. So I think we've got the right things in there now, and I hope that we can start and deliver some improvement against those areas that we need to improve against. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Fiona.
On the EHCP item, I fully agree with Councillor Randall that the percentage is not where we want it to be. And I think those colleagues who are here this evening will know that I said that as soon as I saw it. It's a new figure that we're reporting. We want to be seen to have what we've got in reality. We're not hiding it. So our aim obviously is to be 100%. There is quite a few challenges to the 20 weeks because we do have to allocate quite a number of outside reports as well to go with these, but it is our aim to work really hard to increase that. And it's a symptom of our current challenge with the increase of numbers of children coming forward for these plans. Thank you.
Thank you, Fiona. Phil?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. EV charging points, yes, they have reduced by 17. We need to remember that most of the EV charging points in West Northamptonshire are provided by the private sector. I can't tell you where these that have gone from. All I can say is that none of the EV charging points that we're involved with, like on certain areas on the streets in Northampton, in Abington and St James, they're all still there. But we were awarded a significant amount of money by government towards EV charging, including the appointment of personnel, staff to undertake the or continue work on the EV charging strategy, and that role is currently out to recruitment. So we are getting ahead with the strategy. And once we've got that strategy, we'll be identifying a partner to work with to secure the public installation. But that said, EV charging points are still going in. I think last week in the car park of the Squirrels Public House in Duston, EV charging points were installed. So, you know, the private sector are still investing and still providing them. I mean, I think that's a great place for them to be. It's a car park that has not been available to the public. It is now available for EV charging right in the heart of the village, and I think that's a great success. And of course, the addition of those won't be in these statistics. So that's EV charging points. But can I just say about prosecutions, because I noticed in last week's Chronicle and Echo, our enforcement contractor Kingdom actually had 41 people in court for failing to pay FPNs for mainly dropping cigarette ends. Of all those 41 people, every single one of them incurred a fine, costs, and something else. Can't remember exactly what it was. And I think they totaled £433. So 41 people failing to pay their Kingdom fine ended up in court, and it cost each of them 433. So it's not as if we're not taking action. We are taking it, or there is significant action being taken on our behalf by our contractors, if not by ourselves. But we do have our wardens who are constantly out looking at fly tips in order to obtain the evidence to deliver a prosecution. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Phil. David.
Yeah, well, Wendy's point with regard to the reduction in FPN notice has been issued. We're looking at that because that seems odd. We've got the same resource, so we'll take a look at that and we'll report back.
Thank you, David. Malcolm.
Yeah, you're right, Keith, to point out that issue, and it's I want to obviously take it very seriously. The reason that is developed is that what you won't know is that we're bringing systems together in that area, and you've got to look not only at the number, which is significant, and that's what you saw there today, but also the distribution. And what the system is bringing a lot of older ones, catching up on the older ones, which are the howlers, as it were, for want of a better term, but that has got the system worse in the short term. So, you know, it will get better in the longer term, but that's the reason it's taken that dip in the short term. But thanks for pointing it out.
Thank you, Malcolm. Does that cover everybody who wanted to respond to any of the points raised? Thank you. Those explanations were tremendously helpful. If I may then draw your attention to the recommendations, as always, at section 3, which is to agree the changes to the metrics and note the contents of the report. Agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much indeed. Takes us on to item 8. This one is with Malcolm. This is the revenue monitoring. And this goes up to period 4. We normally do this in quarters. If we've got fresher information by an extra month, we report that too. And that's what we're doing here. So this isn't the first quarter, it's actually the first 4 months. After Malcolm introduces his report, our speakers are Councillors Randall, Purser, Holland Delamere and Harris. Malcolm, over to you.
Okay, thanks, Chair. Page 69 is the best way to view this report, and what it's showing is this is period 4 is reported upon, but it hadn't altered very much from period 3. Now we went through a very extensive meeting last night at scrutiny, so I shall go near as I can to repeat that. So anybody that was there last night, I'm sorry if it's a repeat performance. If you look at the report, what strikes you immediately should do is that there's the biggest variance on there by a significant amount is the Children's Trust at showing a variance from budget of a little bit under 14 million. And there's also communities and opportunities showing a variance year-end outlook, this is, don't forget, of just over 2 million. That's something I expect to improve. And that's primarily down to the homeless situation, which we're currently finding. Another one is looking like a bit of a pressure is adults. That might prove difficult. Bear in mind, we're only a third of the year out, so we'll see where it goes. If you go further down, you'll see most of that is offset by what's called technical centrally controlled budgets. Now, the constituents of that are threefold primarily. There are other things, but the first thing is that we put in a contingency of significance with the expectation that we would have this problem. And obviously that contingency is being used. There's also business rates, which is coming out better than we thought. And also, right, it's not very good news for anybody with a house, but interest rates being where they are, that actually benefits these figures. So all in all, we're looking for a just over 2.75 million overspend at the year end. Now, one or two of the other ones here are showing a zero. That's always a good way of budgeting, and we look for improvements in it as the year goes on. So that's the upshot of it. I'm bound to also say that we've had period 5 figures come through, and it's essentially the same. So we're holding steady. We hold steady in period 3, steady in period 4, and steady in period 5. Now the key to it is quite clearly the Children's Trust, and we had a very extensive meeting with them where we did their next year's budget, and they're showing at the moment a 23 million overspend, of which our share is what you see on that page, just under 14 million. The North get the balance. Now, if they stick to that number, they're saying they're going to be 23 overspend. Now we've actually put in 25, just to give a little bit of extra leeway. And if they stick to that number there or thereabouts, then this budget will come home nicely. They go wildly over, then of course that we have to work a bit harder. But the expectation was that their best case scenario would be an 18 million overspend, which case we would see that figure come down. The worst case, well, there's about a 2.8 million. I won't go to the detail of it, boys. There is a danger, of course, it could go over. So we're in that position. So what it means is everything else, we've got to make sure it's on track. Otherwise, if they go adrift, then we've got problems, which we will address, of course. So that about sums it all up, unless anybody's got a detailed thing. Okay, thanks, Chair. I think we'll settle on that. That's about the sum of it, I think.
Jolly good. Thank you, Malcolm. Just to add on the Children's Trust, of course, but meantime, there's a process that's possible under the contract, and we're using that to get a little closer to the numbers, closer to the forecast, closer to some of the decisions that are taken that affect spend and so on. That process is going forward now. Sorry, Malcolm, do you want something else?
Yeah, just you're quite right. I should have mentioned that. What is also happening is that I've been invited to sit on their financial board next time round, and so we'll get involved. We'll give them a bit of help. They need some help. They lack resource in that area. They're trying very hard, but we're not getting the results we'd like. And there's a number of reasons why that should be, but so we can help them, then we'll help ourselves as well, with what we fully intend to do. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Malcolm. So our first speaker then is Councillor Randall. Wendy, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I found this really, really worrying, but maybe it's me overlooking at things. So of the overspend so far, which was 2.78 million, after the use of 8.2 million of budget contingency, and we're only halfway through this year. If we continue like that, how long will it be before we're bankrupt? So that's my first question. In the dedicated school grant forecast overspend was 1.91 million. 1.6 million was that due to increase in SEND demand. Just wondered if we've got a SEND register, because, you know, we know there's a lot of SEND children that aren't in education due to unsuitable placements. So I just wondered if we've actually got a register to know, because we have got some extremely intelligent children on that are SEND, that there's nowhere suitable. So, you know, I'd imagine that if we put all of those children on the SEND register in a suitable placement, then that demand would be far outstrip that amount. So I'd be interested to know that one. Then it looks like we're spending 200,000 looking after an empty building. And I've just wondered, now the district council, Daventry District Council is empty apart from the job centre. I wondered how much that is costing us to look after that building as well, and when the prediction of the sale of that building will be. And then we got 2.3 million driven by temporary and supported accommodation. Now, surely if we were building more houses, that, you know, we might have to spend that out, but surely that would reduce that bill that we are just going to continue to see going up and up and up every time. So they're my points. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Wendy. I know we've got a lot to come back on that. We'll come back
straight back on that. if that's
together,
right.
shall we, Malcolm? Let's take our speakers and then we'll perhaps, if we may, go back. Our next speaker is Councillor Purser. Bob, over to you. Thanks, Malcolm.
It's unsurprising perhaps that we just need to focus a bit on the children's trust overspend, and it's a very significant amount of money, and it is not sustainable for this authority in the well, I'd say not long term, medium term, even as it is now. This is why the Labour group is making this our main opposition business next week, because we really, for the benefit of the people in Northamptonshire, need to understand what is going on, why it's happening, and what is going to be done about it. I think excessive profits are being made by some of our providers. And I think, given that this is a government-run trust, they should get a grip of this. They should be clawing back excess profits, and we shouldn't be putting us in this position. I suppose looking at the in the corporate plan, some of the children suggest that if we get people in the right placements at the right time, the costs come down. And I hope that's right. Because I think this is more manageable than perhaps sometimes it seems to be. If we get the right placements for the right children at the right time, I think this is manageable. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Bob. Councillor Holland Delamecki. No, you're going to pass. Thank you, Keith. In which case, Councillor Harris. Jonathan, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Evening, councillors. I'm not going to comment on the specifics around performance. I was at corporate scrutiny yesterday evening, and we've already heard from other speakers. I want to refer briefly to the lesser known Appendix C Treasury report. It has been in the press a little over the last couple of weeks, and it would be remiss of me not to mention it. For the speed of time, I'm not going to read Amnesty International's website quote about Qatar. It's there in all its glory for anyone to read if they wish to. Now, I know that the argument about this has been that it's subjective. The decision is subjective about where we invest, and as long as it's on our policy list, then it shouldn't matter. But strangely enough, the other countries that are on our Treasury Management Investment list have not had the same thing said about them. So I'm still baffled as to why we choose to invest in this particular country. Now, of course, I know that the approach is yield first, but the question remains and has to remain, is that enough? By the way, I'm not suggesting in any shape or form that the policy as it stands has been contravened. It's not. That's how the policy is written at the moment. But it still doesn't go far enough. There's no ESG reference. We understand that CITFA are working on some ESG guidelines. But my question is, when will we get it? What's the timeline for that? And do we really have to wait for it? I know from feedback I've had that some of our own council employees are not entirely content with what they read and what they see in this particular area. It's worth reminding everyone also that this administration decided to adopt the UN sustainability goals. And I would argue this is contrary to at least 4 of those areas by pursuing these types of investment, 5, 8, 10, and 16. Our investments decisions can't stand alone, in my view. If we are to use the UN sustainability goals as part of our framework, they've got to factor and they have to play across everything that we do in the council, and not just when they suit us to do so. So my final point is that this has been in the press. This is an area that Councillor Longley and I am sure will not agree on. But the final point I would make is it's incorrect to suggest in the press that this issue hasn't been raised. It's been raised at least twice, once before in Cabinet that I can recall. I think it's also misleading to suggest that Council fully supported it. The administration fully supported it, but so far as I can remember, the opposition didn't, and that vote, of course, is on record. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. John's our last speaker, so quite a lot to get through there. Malcolm, did you want to respond on some of those points?
Well, I got to respond to Wendy first of all. That I think probably Wendy, I perhaps ought to run you through these things. What you're looking at there is a year-end outlook. It's not a situation where it's a month-on-month. It's a year-end outlook. Quite a different set. So your first point about it's going to get worse, but it might do, it might not. But that's the year-end as we stand now. Quite a different concept. That's really, I've got to say to that response. Going on to Bob's view of the situation, yeah, I completely agree. It is quite clearly our biggest issue, without in financial terms, certainly. And I think that, you know, the support of the management, this is really what I was getting at a little bit when I was talking about going on the financial, supporting their board. I do agree there's a management issue there. We had this discussion last night with Jonathan, actually. Is it that we haven't given them enough money in the first place? Element of that, maybe. Or is it a situation where they're not managing properly, as you described might be the case? I don't know is the answer, but I'm going to find out. Because if you look at the placements situation, the budget, the actual spend compared to budget is 20 million out on placements, or 20 million, 23 is a pretty big percentage, as we said. We get that right, you get it right. So you're on the button on that one, Bob. And quite obviously, once I get the opportunity to see what's going on in it, which we haven't thus far, then we're in with a chance, I think. Anyway, we'll see how we go. Treasury report. Thanks, Jonathan. I knew you'd bring this up. I expected you to. That's fine. That's absolutely fine. I'm not going to go through all the arguments. That's all been gone through. Emails abound. What I would say is that you clearly got your agenda on this, and I respect that. That's fine. I've got my agenda, and my agenda is to do whatever I can for the best of the people of West Northampton in the financial terms. I'll always do that, and if that offends you in your agenda, then very unfortunate, but that's how it's going to be. Sit here, and you can take different decisions. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Bucko. I'll make a couple of comments, but Adam, you wanted to comment. Do you want to come in next?
Yeah, just a few comments to pick up on, Chairman. Councillor Randall mentioned the need to build more houses to reduce the temporary accommodation bill. I have to say the thought had occurred to us, and it's something that we're pursuing vigorously. Councillor Purser mentioned that the Children's Trust should be seeking to claw back what he sees as excessive profits from providers. I believe that the Children's Trust will have entered into contracts before paying out those sums, and I'm not sure that there's a law in the land that would allow us to pursue his recommended course of action. On Councillor Harris's comments around the Qatari investments, I do worry that his suggested course of action may end up falling foul of the Economic Activity of Public Bodies Bill currently progressing through Parliament, which would make it unlawful to disinvest or not invest in certain countries based on political views. We'll have to see what the outcome of that legislation is. But I do also believe that his suggested policy is one that would make the poor poorer and the most vulnerable more vulnerable here in West Northamptonshire by not fulfilling our obligation to get the most for taxpayers' money by investing where we get the biggest bang for our buck, as well as complying with all of the other Treasury management requirements that we fulfil. Councillor Harris is right in saying that there are votes on record, but those votes, of course, covered not just the Treasury management strategy, but every other revenue budget paper. And neither he nor any of his Liberal Democrat colleagues nor any other member of the opposition set on record a single objection to the Treasury management strategy during that budget debate, other than a suggestion by Councillor Harris that there should be some kind of loan scheme to residents to insulate their houses. Not the worst idea in the world, but certainly substantially different from disinvesting in certain nations because of political views.
Okay, thank you, Adam. Fiona, you're going to make some comments too?
I just wanted to point out that the Children's Trust is not run by the government, but it actually is run in partnership with Northamptonshire. So everything that we do, that we want to do for the Children's Trust, we have to negotiate with the West and the North to make sure we're both in agreement before we can step in and do anything. But I just think that we have got a marvellous project going on at the moment, which was one of Stuart Lackenby's projects that put forward a circle to success, that they're looking at placement costs, and there are some signs already that they're able, the team that we've put in are bringing those placement costs down. And I think Stuart's got a few other comments he might want to make, but he might need to use this.
This one works.
Yeah.
Fourth time lucky. It's just a quick comment on the high needs block, which is a component part of the DSG. So all children who are known to us are included within our SEND numbers, whether they are in or out of school. So we're actively working with them. There's one point that when we have children whose needs are so complex that we can't get them into school, actually that costs us more money. So financially, there's an incentive for us to get as many kids as we can into our school provision. Final note on that is, whilst we have a level of overspend of 1.6 million on the high needs block, when you compare that against both East Midlands and nationally, we are relatively low in that overspend. And that's not necessarily something to be proud of, but it does reflect that nationally the increase in children coming through is significant. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just to add to some of the comments made, as Malcolm says, we're projecting the year-end forecast, but not only that. I mean, a big part of what we've got here is contingency. We first started keeping contingency in our first and certainly our second budget. When setting our second budget, the big debate was with the Labour Party saying, "What on earth do you need a contingency for? Spend it." So thank goodness we do continue to keep that contingency, and continually you'll see throughout the budget we work hard every day to refocus and get it back on track. We've done that continually during the life of this council. I think in terms of opposition priority business, we'll obviously discuss some of the actions there. But on Bob's point about commercial profiteering or whatever, there is a supply and demand issue, as you get with all things, and a part of that is with a limited supply, prices do go up. We're looking at creating our own capacity. There are projects that we're working on in order to do that, to better create that capacity, which gives us more availability at better cost. And last night, one of the things shown to the scrutiny committee was a number of transformation projects in children, including the Circles of Success project, which is looking carefully at the cost of those. And on Qatar, I'm interested in Councillor Harris's comment and just referring back to those relevant UN sustainability goals. I think the legislation that's coming will be interesting. Fundamental thing about the Qatar investment is this, not only full council, it's buried in a huge report. So I get that. Not everybody can read every single page, but I think we did take this to scrutiny to get a view on. It has been looked at carefully, and scrutiny did not contradict the use of Qatar. The other thing I'd point out is there are a number of very significant sporting events, either annually or within the last year or so, where a number of organisations have pumped millions in order to be covering sporting events. West Northants Council has only taken money out of these countries. We have not put money into their economy. We have invested and then taken it back with more besides, but happy to see where that goes. I have no particular strong view either one way or the other, but in the absence of any other clear view, either from scrutiny or from the government or from SIPFA, we continue to try and get the best return for our taxpayers' support services. Are there any other comments at all from Cabinet on this report, the revenue report? No? Okay, shall we draw that one to a close then? The recommendations, as always, are in the report. Can I just ask you to confirm your agreement? Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you. takes us to a further report with Malcolm. Item 9, period 4, general fund, revenue, HRA, capital monitoring. After you've introduced this, Malcolm, with 3 speakers, councillors Randall, Purser and Holland-Mayor. Malcolm.
Thanks, Chair. Well, this is primarily capital report, as it is obvious to see those that have read it, and there's a lot in there, a lot of detail. Okay, back on when I've got a flashing green. That's that. So. So I don't propose to go through the detail. Anybody that does want any detail of this, of course, is very welcome to it. There's a lot in there. Broadly, the capital programme is run through the CAB meeting, as anybody that's involved with that will know. Every capital item goes through there, and there's a clear priority. It's got to be fully funded, or it's got to be productivity, or partially funded. The various criteria, and it goes down a level. And it seems to be working very well. The broad statement here is that we try very hard to keep borrowings in line, any additional borrowings in line with the maturity profile that we've on our current borrowing. And he wants me to explain that in more detail too now. Anybody wants to further in sort of explain that on it? So that aside with the chair, because I think all the details in the report. Yeah.
Thank you, Malcolm. Let's go to our speakers. Councillor Randall is first. Wendy, over to you. You're happy? Okay, in which case, Councillor Purser. Bob, welcome.
Chair, I'm on paragraph 12.23, which seems to me to raise a very serious issue, which is 2 of the major capital projects that NPH have been involved in over the last few years have fallen through because they're not viable. That's the Avenue campus and the Belgrade House, Clock House. And that seems to me, and we've had to return capital monies to the Department of Levelling Up because of that. And the Department of Levelling Up has returned something like £1.9 billion to the Treasury because of unviable housing schemes for public sector housing, for social housing. This seems to be a real scandal, actually, that we can't make our housing scheme stack up financially. The rules seem to be set against us. So I just wanted to raise that as a really serious issue, because we've got a pipeline of projects coming through, and we see that schemes dropping off. That causes us real problems. We've got 3,000 people on the housing, 3,000 families on the housing waiting list, and we see our schemes go. We see the private sector has the greenfield easy schemes to produce. We are left with the most difficult brownfield schemes. It seems the cards are stacked against us. I'm really worried about this and hope that Cabinet is really addressing what we do about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. And finally, no, you're okay, Keith. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, couple of comments there, mainly around housing schemes. I might comment, Adam might, but did you want to answer anything first of all, Malcolm, on the?
Yeah, just a couple of things. Funding is becoming an issue, Bob, there's no doubt about that. Interest rates tend to do that. But this is a review taking place at this stage, as I understand it, and we'll see where it goes. But it's the important thing we've done, as you should know by now, is that we've resolved the borrowing arrangements. The system we spoke about at some length. I spoke to you some length a few months ago. That seems that we've now sorted that. But funding will always be an issue, and I will make the point now that it's worth saying we've got this concrete issue coming down the track. We've got a cladding issue coming down the track. We have no idea at this stage how and where we will fund that. So funding in this area of housing is a problem, and what you say there, I completely agree with. Is how we resolve it is the issue. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, I think it's important to put on record that the reasons for the non-viability of the two schemes mentioned are different and complex, far too complex to go into tonight, but happy to have a discussion with anyone who's interested outside of this meeting. Councillor Pearce is right to an extent about the inequities that exist between private developers and ourselves. However, I think the approach often taken by private developers is that they will speculatively take out options on land, or they will, speculatively put in planning applications, and that, in my mind, would not be a responsible thing for us to do as a local authority. We do regularly review the land owned by West Northamptonshire Council and review it with a view to potentially building more social housing on those sites. We also have a Okay, as I was saying, we do have a very good and an ever deepening relationship with Homes England, who of course can facilitate brownfield developments, and we're working with them on a number of projects at the moment. Where we are fully aware of the challenges in bringing forward new and viable schemes. If there's some pump priming to be done for schemes, we're open to that, where it can bring other tangible benefits such as localized regeneration. So we're not solely looking at the viability of a single housing development in and of itself. We're taking a more holistic approach, and the depth of experience and knowledge of the team of officers here at the council is superb, as it is at MPH. So I think we have all the tools, and as Councillor Longley has set out, we also have the financial will and means to bring forward more projects, and hopefully we'll start seeing planning applications and significant planning applications at that in the very near future.
Thank you, Adam. And just to add to that, you're right about the brownfield sites. That almost is a choice of ours, isn't it? We think it's the right thing in terms of place shaping and what we should do. We could do otherwise. I suppose the flip side of that is we do have, if you like, the advantage of access to public money and cheap borrowing as a result. But in order to justify that, we then have to make schemes stack up, and the rents have to be able to cover the cost of borrowing. That's the only responsible way to do it. And what we've seen, of course, is a period where build costs have gone up so much, contractors won't hold prices for more than 5 minutes and so on. And it's been an incredibly difficult time. And the schemes you mentioned were bold schemes with an element of regeneration to them as well, like Belgrave House, of course, to bring the vibrancy of young people living there into the town and so on. So, I mean, the good news is, as I say, Riverside and Beaumont House, some of these are still proceeding. Our commitment is full to building as much as we can, providing the numbers stack up. I think that's probably covers the key points raised on that. Anybody any further points at all on this one? No? Can I just ask you to confirm your agreement to the recommendations? Is that agreed? Thank you very much. Takes us on to item 10. This one is with Fiona. Fiona's going to introduce it, following which we have 3 speakers, Councillors Purser, Roberts and Humphreys. Fiona, over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. With your indulgence, apart from my introduction to this paper, I'd like to also read a statement that I've got from a care leaver who did hope to join us this evening but hasn't been able to. So, treating care experience as if it were a protected characteristic. This report is being presented as I'm asking the council to agree to treating care experienced children as if they were had a protected characteristic. By this, we mean those children, young people who have been looked after and become care leavers. As a council, we're very passionate about all our children and work with many organisations and providers to ensure outcomes for children are met. We're equally passionate about care experienced children, ensuring that they have safe and stable homes. We're working hard to ensure we have sufficiency of homes, working hard to keep children in care close to their families and friends and the area they know. And we're working hard to ensure they have the right educational employment opportunities to enable them to thrive, including opportunities around work experience and apprenticeships. However, we know children and young people who are care experienced can often face discrimination. Sometimes it is discrimination like that, which is already a protected characteristic and therefore protected in law via the Equality Act in 2010. We feel as a council we'd like to ensure that care experienced children do not suffer discrimination and have the same opportunities as all children and young people. Therefore, we're asking that they are treated as if care experience was a protected characteristic. Approximately 47 councils have already agreed to do this. By us as a council leading on this in WNC, we would hope to support some of our partners and businesses within the local area to do the same. We already have corporate parenting responsibilities as members, and we want to support those being a wider expectation of others. And this enables us to address some of the challenges care experienced children and young people have and start to ensure that they have equal opportunities to their peers and are supported and protected to thrive. I will therefore ask the council to agree that we treat care experience as if it was a protected characteristic. So with your indulgence, I will just read you, I've had a couple, but I'll just read you one as I know time is of the essence. I am Louise. I'm 24 years old and a care leaver. As a person that's been in care for a very long time, what I'd like to see is better mental health care for care leavers. In the past, when I've reached out for support, I feel I've not been taken seriously. The fact that I'm a care leaver and things I've seen have not been taken into account. You are just expected to get on with it without life struggles and being taken into account or recognised. We all deserve better mental health care, especially care leavers. It's not good enough. If this motion is passed, it will mean care leavers like me will be taken seriously and given the support which will help care leavers lead more positive lives. I've got two more, Chair, but I won't read those out now because of time. Thank you.
Thank you, Fiona. Thank you very much indeed. Will you pass our thanks back to those who have written things that you've quoted? So on to our speakers then. Councillor Purser first. Bob, over to you. You're okay. Thank you. Councillor Roberts. Emma.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, really pleased to see what appears to have been a motion submission just brought straight here because you're in administration, so you can make the decision. It looks like there was an intention to submit a motion, but that's now come here. We've been asking for that for quite a while, so it's great to see that.
No.
Clearly set out on page 154, and that deals with the socio-economic duty. You recall, I would imagine, that this council refused to adopt the socio-economic duty as set out in the Equality Act a couple of months ago. And I think it's a bit ironic that we're now putting evidence base within a report that we're saying we want to do this because clearly the socio-economic duty should apply. So I absolutely think that those with care experience should be considered to have a protected characteristic, but it clearly identifies how the needs of care experienced individuals are impacted by socio-economic factors, which this council previously suggested it didn't really need to consider. So in my view, we would best serve our care experienced residents and all those with protected characteristics by adopting Part 1 of the Equality Act. And on the back of this worthy decision, really pleased with this decision, I would ask the Cabinet to revisit the Council's position on adopting the socio-economic duty so we can ensure that those care leavers who have experienced these stigmas and clear inequality as detailed in the report, we also look at why, and the socio-economic factors of inequality are clearly detailed by all of those who are recommending supporting such motions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Emma. Finally, Councillor Humphreys. Rosie, you're going to pass too. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, should we go back to Fiona? Do you want to add any further comments or answer any of those comments made there? I might bring in others if they wish to.
Oh, this one's working. No, I think one of the things that I just want to say is that actually, as I pointed out to you earlier, I've had a number of care leavers who've supported and sent me information this evening, but I will go back to them and thank them. But obviously they feel very strongly about this. So I hope that all my cabinet colleagues will agree. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It might be one to reflect on rather than answer this evening. Emma suggested a bit of a paradox in our decision making and so on. We just reflect on that. Does anybody want to comment on that? Is that something to revisit? Something to revisit, I think, Emma. Thank you. Any further comments from Cabinet at all? No? Okay. In which case, can I direct your attention to the recommendations? Are those agreed? Thank you very much. Takes us on to item 11. Item 11 is procurement and implementation of educational services case management system. Again, it's with Fiona. And once you've introduced it, Fiona, actually on this one, we have no speakers. So it's just over to you to introduce it.
Children's Education Service use Capital One as their case management system. The contract for these end in March 2024. Therefore, we require members to approve to progress with procurement of a case management system for education services. Having this case management system is a necessity, and as outlined in the report, it is used to record and capture significant amount of data and information. Education services requires effective and efficient technology solutions to enable the service to deliver against the improved life chances council priority, ensuring children are given the best start in life and vulnerable children are supported and protected. The current contract end date does not allow for the council to conduct an open procurement process and implement a new case management system. The recommendation proposed allows for continuity of the current provision, while with minimal disruption to services, and allows for further time to complete a procurement process for the long-term solution. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is a joint by the way. Sorry, I should have mentioned that.
Working with North.
It's a joint process between us and the North, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody have any others? Probably quite straightforward. I know we've discussed it at length outside of this meeting formally, but does anyone have any other questions, comments, observations on this? No. Okay, brilliant. In which case, just ask you to confirm your agreement, please, to the recommendations of section 3. Agreed? Thank you very much. Again with Fiona, that takes us on to item 12. This is proposal for a Hunsbury Park Send unit to operate in part of Chiltern Primary from October 23. So we have on this one, once Fiona's introduced it, 2 speakers, Councillor Randall and Councillor Roberts. Fiona, over to you.
Thank you. We're seeking cabinet approval to proceed with the creation of 55 additional places for primary age children with autistic spectrum condition. If agreed, this will be met by delivering the Hunsbury Park Special Educational Needs and Disability Unit from an annex site at Chiltern Primary School, which is outlined fully in the report. Members will be aware that a statutory consultation took place between the 22nd of June 2023 and the 19th of July 2023. For part of Hunsbury Send unit to operate from Chiltern Primary School instead of the original plans for the entire unit to operate on the Hunsbury Park site from September 2023. The provision caters for primary age school children who are in receipt of an education healthcare plan and a primary need of ASC. The majority of responses to the public consultation were in favour of this approach and support the council continuing with this plan. The details of the responses are included in the full report. We originally established plans for Hunsbury Park, 50-place Send unit to be created in 2 phases. Phase 1 saw 20 places being delivered at Hunsbury Park Primary for new pupils attending from September 2022 in reception 1 and 2, Key Stage 1. However, due to construction constraints and a delayed delivery date, the remaining provision, which was planned as part of phase 2 for 30 places in years 3 to 6, which is Key Stage 2, cannot be accommodated on the same site. As a result, we explored alternative options with sufficient spare accommodation having been identified at Chiltern Primary School, Northampton. This will enable the Hunsbury Park Send unit to operate as an annex site at Chiltern, and the increased space will allow for 45 new Send places to be created. 30 Key Stage 2 places will be available for new children to start from Monday, the 2nd of October, 2023, and a further 15 Key Stage 2 places will be created in time for new children to start from September 2024. Operating part of the Hunsbury Park Send unit at Chiltern Primary will also enable a further 10 places to be created on the Hunsbury site as part of construction work due to be completed in January 2024. Overall, this will result in a total of 75 very much needed new places being created during both phases, which will incur 25 above the original plans made. This proposal is to ensure that as a council, we're able to fulfil our statutory obligation of providing a sufficiency of Send places. Having this increased number will enable us to have more provision for some of our most vulnerable children and support us further in improving our services, our provision, sufficiency, and ensure the best outcomes for children. Very much needed places, as you are aware from previous reports, with the high numbers of children coming forward in this area. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. So through to our speakers. First of all, Councillor Randall. Wendy, welcome.
Thank you, Chair. Mine's just a very quick question. What were the construction constraints? And why did it take so long for this decision to become public? Because those children were already off those places, so it's caused extreme distress to families, and they still don't understand exactly what went wrong. So I'd appreciate you telling me, please. Thank you.
Charlie, good. Thank you, Wendy. Next is Councillor Roberts. Emma, welcome.
Thank you, Chair. I won't go over all the disasters that got us here. They're well documented and reported, and my view was made very clear at the time. I would say, however, that I've still needed to raise quite a number of issues with regards to our communication on progress to families and also communication from the school. So it hasn't been smooth sailing since we went out to consultation and before this decision. We've still had to raise those concerns. On one of the concerns, which was regard to delivery, directors have very kindly allayed some of my fears over progress, and I thank prompt responses from them on that. They've also shared their confidence on the places being ready for the 2nd of October, which, you know, I'm crossing every finger because that is really needed for those families who are waiting on that place and have had to make alternative arrangements. The report, however, at table 1 at 2.3 still has a line that says total number of new places to be delivered by January 24, subject to project delivery times. That's a real worry because these placements are being named in EHCPs. The placement, children are being told that that is where they're going to go. If we've got any doubt over project delivery timescales, I'm really concerned about the schools being added as placements to EHCPs, because not only does it add anxiety and pressure to a family, it also potentially increases the cost for this authority, which we can little afford, because we'll need to put in place, and we are having to do, in an instance I'm aware of, alternative education in the form of an EOTAS package. So where there's any doubt whatsoever that we're going to deliver this, we really need to think about what that's doing to the children and families that we are presenting this as a place to. There's also a further 30 places at Chiltern, and then a further 15 after that, but they don't have the same caveat attached to them. So they don't say subject to project timescales. I appreciate they've got a longer timescale on them, but I would have thought the same risk would apply. If it doesn't, why not? And can the cabinet member give really good and clear assurances to people that these timelines are going to be met and that clear communication will be given to them well in advance if they aren't? And I would ask that we do consider whether or not it's the right thing to put these placements into current EHCPs. Thank you.
Jolly good. Thank you, Emma. Fiona, over to you. Pick up any of those points that you can.
Because this is building project, just one thing to say that we do now have a board for all our school buildings, which it meets very regularly to make sure that we know exactly what's happening with our school buildings, which is probably something we neglected to do in the past from our education team. But I'm sure I'll pass over to Stuart Timmis, who can talk on the building side, because that's his department, not mine.
Stuart, did you want to comment on that?
Yes, happy to come in. And again, I think some good questions raised there in terms of what happened. I'm more than happy to go back and pull a full report together that we can share with parents and indeed members going forward. I always like to do lessons learned at the end of a project, and that's exactly what we'll be doing in this case. So rather than respond in detail now, again, we'll take that away and respond in due course. In terms of our confidence of delivering the stage 2, we have a program plan. We are working the program plan. We have in weekly meetings with the developers of the site, as well as project managers, etc. So it's a construction project, and yes, things can happen within construction, but at this particular time, we've got a 100% confidence that those timelines will be met. Whether anything changes, I do take your point. As if we see any change, we will communicate immediately with parents, should that be the case. But at this point, as we've delivered the Chiltern and Hunsbury phase 1 to time and of a quality, I think hopefully everyone will get a chance to have a look around that what we have achieved there, and it really is a facility to be proud of as we go forward. I've got no reason to doubt that phase 2 will be anything but what we've been able to deliver in terms of quality, in terms of the price, and in terms of the timescales. But again, that is being monitored on a weekly basis, and if anything does change, we will report that immediately. Thank you.
Thanks, Stuart. Anything further at all? Fiona, anything for you to add? Any other questions from anybody else, or comments, observations? No. Okay, thank you. In which case, can I just ask you to confirm your agreement to the recommendations on that one, please? Agreed. Thank you very much. That takes us on to item 13, and item 13 is Leisure Centre procurement approval. This one's with Adam. Adam, we'll over to you to introduce it, followed by a couple of speakers, Councillor Randall and Councillor Duffy.
Thank you, Chairman. Hopefully a simple issue in principle, although one underpinned by quite a lot of complexities once we enter into any procurement process. Essentially, we have before us an opportunity brought about by the end of 2 different contracts at the end of March in 2026. Those are the sport and leisure contracts covering the former Daventry district and the former Northampton borough, and 3 facilities within each. Recommendations under 3 recommend that we do go out to procurement. We have the option keep 2 next to me. We have the option not to go out to procurement as outlined in the report. However, I think it would be completely irresponsible were we not to do so, given the value of the contracts. We're currently talking about contracts that total around £13 million, and it is right and proper that we go to market and we test whether we can get contracts that either offer better value for money or offer better social value, and contracts which simply serve our residents better. There has been suggestions from some quarters that this decision is somehow this proposal is somehow a reflection on current providers. It isn't. It's simply the case that we have a fiscal and moral duty to our residents to get that best value out of the contracts before us. The contracts covering the former South Northampton area expire several. Contracts in the former South Northampton area expire several years after the as I'm trying to say, the contracts in the former South Northampton area expire several years after the contracts that we're looking at this evening. I would draw members' attention to the timetable set out in 5.5 and particularly the proposed event or events in February of next year, which include a member workshop, so an opportunity for members from all sides to contribute their ideas about how they want the leisure services in the former Daventry and Northampton areas to look in the years ahead. It's entirely plausible that at the end of this exercise, we end up with something rather similar to what we have today, but equally, it's possible that we end up with something completely different. There is no predisposition to any provider. Everyone has a fair crack at the whip, and if we do indeed enter into this procurement exercise, then the contracts will be awarded to the most suitable provider according to the framework that will be drawn up in the months ahead. So with that, happy to take questions, Chairman.
Jolly good. Thank you, Adam. So our speakers then, Councillor Randall, Wendy, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So from reading this paper, my understanding is that SLM are already on a repairing lease and the Northampton ones aren't. And the idea is to put them all onto a repairing lease. Is that correct? So you're going to spend £150 for the surveys to assess all of those buildings, which is fine. Then approve a 200k for legal. I thought we had in-house legal now. Is that nothing that our team can do? And do we have to go out to professional bodies? Haven't we got anybody in-house or skill set to do that? So that was one thing. Then if it comes back from those surveys that there's quite a lot of repairs needed on those buildings, would we repair that before we went out to procurement, or would we go out to procurement telling them what needs to be repaired? And if there's quite a lot of repairs that need doing, is there a risk that actually nobody wants to take on the procurement for those leisure centres at all? And there is a risk that we could be left with no leisure centres. Thank you.
There we go. Thank you. Thanks, Wendy. Councillor Duffy, Janice, welcome.
I just wanted to come along tonight to say, to sing the praises really of Trilogy and the other contractor, because they've gone so far up above and beyond their remit in social care. I've just got something written. Trilogy Active has been a familiar name and brand in Northampton for over a decade now, especially in my ward of Talavera. People in Northampton know it as a place to go for sport activities and also entertainment. Trilogy provides an invaluable service referring to the social value to communities through schemes like free wellbeing walks for people who are starting out in exercise and suffering from mental and physical health problems. In deprived areas, there is really a lot of importance that has to be given to sports centres and similar things that Trilogy provides. Provide exercise for people in exercise in people's homes through their online fitness classes. Most importantly, their familiarity allows them to create links with doctors' surgeries. Going back to problems of deprivation, we have obesity on the rise, we have diabetes on the rise, and it's so important for exercise for people. Their contract with the council is not perfect, and I appreciate the Cabinet wants to find a more manageable and cost-effective deal. But it's important not to allow finances to overshadow such a community asset. I am asking the Cabinet for their reassurance that they will give Trilogy a fair hearing in the upcoming procurement process, should they choose to enter it. I ask that it takes into account Trilogy's existing work in improving the health of our residents and how this may be impacted if the contract is given to another company before considering their financial offer. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Janice. Adam, over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to comment on Councillor Randall's points, all good points. The budget for legal is the maximum. We do anticipate that coming down significantly across the course of the exercise. We will use in-house resources wherever we can to reduce that bill. We're just mindful of the scale of this exercise and the significant use of resources that it entailed. So we do need to ensure that we have adequate capacity, whether that's through bringing in outside help or by whatever other means. In terms of the repairs, it's important that we go into this process with our eyes wide open, and that we give any potential contractors a fair representation of what they're entering into, and that's why the stock condition surveys are so important. Doubtless, the result of those stock condition surveys will have some impact on the views taken by potential contract providers. But once we have the results of those surveys, then we'll take a view on the necessary course of action. I'm not going to prejudge the outcome of the stock condition survey, but we'll take whatever course of action is needed to get best value for the taxpayer. I don't foresee a situation where we end up with no leisure centres. I think part of the reason that we're starting this process so early is so that we can manage any emerging risks. So I think that covers that one off. Councillor Duffy, I think I covered all of the points that you raised in my opening remarks. Everyone will have a fair crack at this contract, existing provider or not. We recognise, we acknowledge, and we express our gratitude for the ongoing work by Trilogy and indeed everyone active in the former Daventry area. All of those factors will be taken into account, but what's important is the future delivery of services. But one of my main priorities, if and when we do enter into this procurement exercise, is that the new contracts reflect the needs of the local communities being served by the leisure centres. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach. The communities in Moulton and Daventry are markedly different from that around Lings Forum. So we need to have a suitable scale of the type of service that you mentioned in your remarks. So that will all be factored in, and equally in Daventry as well. There is a need for social prescribing, for accessible activities for children during school holidays, or all of the other things that leisure centre providers operate at this time. So we'll do our best to ensure that that continues. But certainly there's no prejudice either for or against a contractor. This is an objective and fair procurement exercise subject to the agreement of cabinet in a moment. And I can't in my position prejudice that process. We have to go through this procurement exercise before we say who our preferred provider is. But I do hope that we have an open and well-contested procurement exercise, both from, both with participation from the existing providers as well as others, so that we can drive up those standards and get the best value for our taxpayers.
Jolly good. Thank you, Adam. Any other final comments on this? Anybody want to add anything? No? Okay, thank you. In which case, then the recommendations there in section 3, can I ask you to confirm your agreement? Is that agreed? Thank you very much. That takes us on to item 14. This one is with Dan. It's the Northampton Towns Fund, removal of asbestos. After you've introduced the report, Dan, you just have, let's see, it's like one speaker, Councillor, but no, sorry, there are two speakers, Councillor Purser and Councillor Harris. Over to you, Dan.
Thank you, Chair. Very simple, straightforward report. It's an update following the purchase of the Wood Street building and seeking authority to enter into both a construction contract and a contract to remove asbestos from what was the BHS building. It's very simple, and that's it, Chair. Thank you.
Good, thank you. Let's go to our speakers. Bob, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. It might be a simple paper, but I think it's quite a complex project. And I think I welcome the progress that's being made. It's 16 months since it last came to Cabinet. I hope we're making enough progress fast enough. It's good that we've got a project team. Concerned that we haven't got a preferred developer. Is that a concern I should have, or is that are we a development partner, which we will be looking for? Concerned about the inflation in building costs and that we're still within the envelope that we set before. A big project like this provides real opportunities to improve the public realm associated with the building. Hope that we're beginning to plan that in now at this stage of the development so that it isn't an afterthought, and that we're really using this as an opportunity to improve and develop this part of our town centre. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you for your comments. Councillor Harris, Jonathan.
Thank you, Chair. Many comments earlier on the piece I spoke to earlier about best return on investment for residents, and my comments and queries are in that vein, because of course I wouldn't disagree with that. 5.5 of the report says without public sector intervention, the market would not deliver this scheme. It goes on to say the site has substantial viability challenges, so that gives me some concerns. Now, I know that this is grant funding largely here, 9.7 million, which specifically in the report talks about this removal of asbestos for 35 to 45 Abington Street. Doesn't mention 20 to 28 Wood Street at all. So my question is, does this grant include Wood Street, and what exactly is the cost for the removal of this asbestos? Again, the only figure I can find in the report is the overall 9.7 million. So I think it would be very useful just to understand exactly how much this remediation work would cost. I have to say, it also seems a little odd that this is clearly being led by us with a lot of public sector money going into it. And, still, as I last looked at things, private sector generally tends to have more cash than the public sector. So I'm trying to get my head around the understanding of exactly what this will do for us and why we seem to be taking quite a large amount of the risk potentially here. And similar to Councillor Purser, are there already confirmed developers in place that will take this site on once this work has been done? Or is this a speculative project without any confirmation of that at this stage? Thank you.
Jolly good, Dan, over to you. Do you want to come?
Try and go through some of those in order. I think the 5.5 with Councillor Harris identified really answers the question in terms of why public sector needs to get involved in a town centre development of this complexity, and it is down to viability. It doesn't stack up in commercial terms. We need to de-risk it, and this is what many town centres across up and down the country have had to do with challenging departmental stores such as this one. I think we're fortunate that we've been able to create a size and a scale of site which will be attractive to the development market, and certainly soft market testing has identified a number of interested developers who would be wanting to partner with us. So we've got the interest, we've got the site, we've now got to de-risk it so that when the market comes to the table, we can actually deliver on the aspects that Councillor Harris and Councillor Purser have touched on there. So by removing the acquisition, the remediation and the expense of things and the risks. Sorry, there's risk with asbestos. You never know quite what you're getting into once you get into a building. So by us taking on those risks, all covered by government grant, there is no council monies going into this site. It is all towns fund cash that has been presented to us. We do feel confident that the market will then be able to pick it up and deliver on the quality that is required for this scheme. The public realm will certainly not be an afterthought. There will be a brief, and the way we procure this will make sure the council still retains some control as we go forward in terms of making sure we get something that fits in with the renaissance, if you like, for the town centre as we're going forward. Timescales, yes, we're still confident that we'll deliver this in the timescales that have been identified to government. Inflation costs have gone up, but our experience on similar schemes is that we can still deliver in regard to the funding and the envelope for funding that has been set out. I think that answers all of the questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Stuart. Any further comments at all? I'll add to that briefly and say, slightly reiterating what Stuart said. First of all, it may be some months since it last came to Cabinet. This is a very complex project where finally the Wood Street building has slotted into place. And it's quite incredible to think that we've acquired those 3 significant buildings to now get the whole site, which is wonderful. And our input is about market failure. That's the role of local authorities, isn't it? We don't deal in markets where we compete with our taxpayers for what they do for a living. We step in when there is market failure, and there is no market that would rejuvenate those outdated buildings for a purpose that no one any longer needs. That's exactly what the public sector is there for. Our role to step in, and the government happens to come up with the town's fund to meet exactly that kind of need. So that's what we've done. Any further comments on this one? If not, suggest that we move to the vote. Okay, everybody sees the recommendations. Are you happy to approve those recommendations? Agreed. Thank you very much. That takes us on to item 15. This is an important item. I'll just make a quick introduction to it. Then we have 4 speakers. We have Claire Robertson Marriott, who we welcome, and then 3 councillors, Randall, Roberts and Harris. Just by way of quick introduction, really important. This is an anniversary, reflects the anniversary of our sustainability strategy, which was launched a little over a year ago. This is our first full report. The report represents a significant step in the Council's journey to sustainability towards achieving key sustainable commitments, including our ambitious goals of achieving net zero for the Council by 2030 and, of course, for West Northampton by 2045. During that time, we've established a dedicated sustainability team, although more importantly, beyond just a small core team, we have got sustainability, hopefully increasingly as a theme throughout the organisation. We have a cross-party working group, which is an excellent way to steer the project, and we all equally contribute to what's going on in that with ideas and monitoring. So I'm pretty proud in the progress that this report says we are starting to achieve through implementing a whole bunch of different practices, initiatives, projects, support for businesses and support for householders to reduce their emissions. Our sustainability pledges obviously were that we would be net zero by 2030 and that the whole area would be 2045. We wanted to take a community leadership role and we wanted to ensure that all the council strategies are aligned. I think we're making progress on all of those. So overall, lots of initiatives, lots of progress. Plus, you'll see in the report, emissions reporting. That was really important. A year ago when we launched, we couldn't tell people when they asked us what our emissions were, and it was essential that we calculated them carefully, and that's reflected in there. You'll see we generate quite a lot of emissions. A big part of is our electricity uses. You'll see some significant projects coming forward during this coming year, including for solar, to reduce that down to little or nothing on the electrical side. So it's thanks to the core team for this excellent first year's progress in the report. Also for the staff across all the directories, probably most particularly place, inevitably a lot of the things where we're able to make progress on this is in the place directorate. Also to the cross-party working group, and then also our other partners such as Climate Action West Northampton, for example, who assist us but challenge us also through their council watch pages and others, all in all a joint effort. Let's go to our speakers. First of all, welcome Claire Robertson, Marriott. Claire, over to you. You just need to press the middle button there, and with a bit of luck, the microphone will work for you.
Well, thank you for allowing me to speak. I know I'm preempting a couple of motions next week that have been presented on this issue of climate. I just want to make some general comments about the report, and I did enjoy reading it and felt that it was very positive. But there were some things that I feel could be improved upon. So I always like to start when I think about climate, that we need to kind of get to grips with what net zero is and what we're actually aiming for. And it does link to the definition of sustainability. And net zero, is the balance of what we put into the atmosphere and what we can sequester. But what it doesn't do is actually remove what is in the bathtub of the atmosphere. And I think, the politicians at Westminster forget that. And I think in a sustainability report, which is actually engaging with the public, we need to be informing them of those kind of basics, because then they will understand any actions that are taken. So, the 1.5 that we're trying to achieve to retain as a temperature, will still involve extreme weather events, and people need to know that. So even if we get to net zero, we still got that 1.5 impact of climate warming to deal with, unless, we actually increase our kind of carbon sequestering. On that note, the World Meteorological Office has warned that there is a 66% chance of global temperatures reaching more than 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels for at least 1 year between this year and 2027. So I think, the sustainability report needs to refer to the urgency that we're all going to be impacted. London has its climate review. So I think we could actually be using the term climate emergency in that report, just to remind people that this is, really what we're talking about. And I do think it's urgent. Our region is vulnerable geographically. We're amongst the driest and the hottest regions of the country. So there are going to be water shortages. It could be 40 degrees again. We've actually got away with it this year. But that's not to say that the winter might be cold. So, this is a real issue that the report has got to kind of show some creativity about how it presents that information. I liked the fact that sustainability was kind of dealt with in 3 themes. So the economic, social, and the environmental. And I think it's useful from a project point of view, but I think there are cases where you need to have a more integrated approach. So, I mean, if I take air quality, for example, which I know is going to be presented as a motion next week. That's such a broad issue, but it's so related to climate because obviously the emissions are greenhouse gases. And I think if we start to think about that in terms of transport, active travel, and also planting, green infrastructure, increasing green infrastructure, I think there is a positive process to having a more integrated approach to the issues that the emergency is going to throw at us. It might actually help the funding as well, because I did note that in the report, there are lots of little pieces of funding that's available that enables, a few houses to be retrofit or, some kind of development somewhere else. I don't want to be specific, but, I just wondered whether there are any ways that you could integrate funding so you could actually target these issues from a more integrated approach. There was a lot of emphasis on nature and biodiversity, which I think is really, really important. The World Wildlife Fund, it says that we've actually lost our connection with nature. And we know research talks about well-being and how we kind of react to nature, and particularly in the town. I think there is room for the town investment plan to have an increased biodiversity in there in various forms. And there are lots of green infrastructure companies that can actually assist with that. So I think that really deserves a push for reasons that we know. The UK is one of the worst for biodiversity decline, and whatever is done in Northamptonshire is going to impact the rest of the UK.
Yes.
So we need to provide models.
Forgive me for interrupting. We always with the public speaker stretch the 3 minutes a bit, but we're at 6.
Okay.
I just ought to.
Can I just say that I think the sustainability in the climate emergency should be framed as a public protection issue. So I'll leave it there.
Thank you very much for coming on and your comments. Thank you. Our councillors, then we have, is Councillor yes, Wendy's still with us. Wendy, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I just wondered why our gross emissions had gone up by 3.4% and what area that was in. Of the tree planting, I welcome the tree planting at Hedgerow. Thanks to Cummins that planted so much up on Borough Hill for their 50 years of being in the town. But I wondered, do we keep a record of how many trees were removed? Because there is quite a lot of development going on where hedgerows and trees have been ripped out. And I don't know if we count them when we go into a planning stage. And I know that they're supposed to be replaced in a suitable location. But if that isn't until the end of a build, that could be for another 20 years. Air quality, obviously, we know that that's a real issue. And for me, we just seem to, and, I'm on the working group with you, Jonathan, but it'd be great if we'd done a lot quicker. Thank you.
Thank you. And next we've got Councillor Roberts. Emma, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I sat on the sustainability group for a while, so I do appreciate the level of work that has gone into this and how it isn't easy to tackle all of those things whilst all of those other things are ongoing. So credit where credit's due for a huge amount of work that has gone on. But there's a couple of points that are quite close to my heart that I kind of wanted to address today. The first one relates to a reference on page 9 to traffic-free routes in the Delapre area. It feels great, sounds great, but it isn't really there. And I don't think we should make statements like traffic-free routes, because we certainly haven't got traffic-free routes in the Delapre area. The Abington Active Travel Scheme for example, doesn't actually pass any further down Rushmere Road or into the Delapre area. So it doesn't connect the active travel quarter and the Abington active travel scheme. So it doesn't feel very active. So I don't want us to be disingenuous about things that we put in reports. Also, I want to focus on the small paragraph that's there with regards to public e-scooters. I have to say it's a huge disappointment to me at the moment that both the cabinet member, the leader of the council, Voy, the police, member inquiries, anybody that's received the email has ignored all of my communication in respect of the over 300 reports of offences on Toaster Road. Voy have completely, they acknowledged my request for data, but have completely failed to respond, except somebody at the council sent me a presentation telling me how many vehicle replacements of car journeys we'd done with the scooters. Not doubting the fact that these are green and offer a contribution to the green agenda, not doubting the fact that there are opportunities here to reduce our carbon footprint with them. But everybody, including the Transport Select Committee, are saying that this is not being handled appropriately. And everybody has ignored my resident and everybody has ignored me and failed to respond to his concerns. In his most recent email, he tells you that the Voy app is a complete joke. He's reported significant offences, repeat offenders, 10 times the same individual with the registration number of the vehicle, yet Voy have not used any of their discretionary powers to cease the use of that vehicle. So they're not following through anything they do. The e-scooter regulations that were provided by the government back in 2022 suggested that we should provide situation reports. Monthly situation reports should be completed to ensure the safe conduct of the trials. Are we completing any of this? Are these being completed monthly for the government? I haven't seen anything. Every time I request data, I don't get any. Everybody is ignoring this. And what it seems to my residents is this is because we have put the revenue of this scheme above any safety and compliance issues. We mentioned the online reporting facility in the document. We talk about there being clear evidence of action being taken, but that it absolutely is clear evidence of action not being taken. And I just think we shouldn't put stuff like this in our reports to say we're doing a good job if you can't even bother to reply to an elected member, if the provider can't bother to reply to an elected member, and 3 emails in, you can't be bothered to reply to my resident. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Emma. And then next we have Councillor Harris. Jonathan.
Thank you, Chair. I too would just like to echo comments made and commend the work of the team. This is a comprehensive report and we have made some good progress, and I'd be the first to admit that we should capture that and report it. I will always be the person that sits in the room and says we should not be complacent. We've got much more to do. And I hope that as this report evolves on an annual basis, we can add more transparency specifically about challenges, because we have got some challenges and dilemmas to make in regards to policy. And I hope that we can continue to reflect those in a future report of this nature, but also we'll keep talking about the work in hand that we have to do. Now, some of you will know that I am attending something called the UK 100 Leadership Academy. The UK 100 is the organisation that we are working with and have made our pledges to. They work with around 108 councils across the UK, all different tiers. And I'm just wanting to say to Cabinet to brace yourself, because it's my full intention to be coming back with information, knowledge, and sharing it. The first thing that you will be getting from me is a little bit of bedtime reading, which I hope you'll take the time to read. A couple of reports called Powers in Place, along with its nature supplement. They're extremely well put together by UK 100, and they show all of the areas that councils currently have influence on and the focuses that we should be applying to them. That's obviously something that the sustainability group is working to do also. But it also makes a plea to government on some areas where we don't have the full powers that we'd ideally like to have right now. So hopefully that's something that we can echo and maybe push for. So I would welcome the report. keep banging the drum to suggest that we need to escalate and amplify the agenda. There's one specific area that I want to flag, which is linked to the biodiversity issue. We know that the legislation is due to change in November in terms of net gain. And as part of that process, there is the issue around net gain units or credits for developers. My understanding is that the legislation pushes or suggests that the net gain should be on location, on site. And where that isn't possible, that there is a credit system. Now, I haven't seen anything on this from our council's perspective yet in terms of a written document or proposal. I believe that Simon Bowers is going to come to a sustainability meeting in the future. But my question is, do we have anything at this stage that sets out what our approach to this will be? Thank you.
Jolly good. Thank you to all those comments, and thanks to those who had indeed attended and been part of the cross-party group. Particularly thanks to Jonathan. A couple of things perhaps to come back on. Emissions up. Yeah, partly this is Wendy, like the earlier performance report where we've added 27 things. With the emissions report, we initially hadn't included a number of things. We now include the emissions that relate to people working for WNC from home. Those were not previously included. So those are now in there, as is a certain amount of materials usage, which we didn't include first time round. So those have added, but in actual fact, the two scopes, the sort of direct emissions, what we call scope 1 and scope 2, they are down. But so some of it's about including more things. Thank you to Claire Robertson Marriott for some very sort of thought-provoking comments. I won't necessarily mention any particular thing. I think many of those thought processes you mentioned we have been through, but more to consider. Tree removal, and tree is always really, really difficult. It's really, I know this is one that Phil, do you want to comment on tree removal and measuring trees at all, Phil? I know it's one we've tried to think very hard about an effective way of measuring it, but it is extremely hard. The Queen's Green canopy was about the closest we got to being able to, because at least we felt we had an influence on that, didn't we? Okay, e-scooters, I've seen those emails. I have sent myself one on to Voy, but then see I keep getting copied in on more and more stuff. I think they've had it and they saw it, and I noticed that unusually they've got registration plates, which for me means they should be able to trace whoever was riding them at that moment, but perhaps I need to follow up with Voy. Okay, all right then. Well, we'll give that another. Yeah. And they. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, everybody else, for further comments. Does anybody else want to make any other comment? Adam, over to you.
And just a minor point on the traffic free routes in the Delapre area. The version of the report that I'm looking at does describe them as proposed traffic free routes. So they've not been. We're not backslapping yet, and it does say that they'll be delivered in this financial year. So it is, as far as I read it, it is in the report as something that will be delivered. But clearly hasn't been delivered yet. So hopefully that just clears that one up.
Jolly good, thank you. Any other comments, questions? Do
Yeah,
you want to comment?
I mean, you asked if I wanted to comment on trees. Not at this moment in time. We are in the process of developing our tree strategy policy, and obviously all these things will come out then. But there's a lot about planting the right trees in the right place, and we've got a lot of issues where we haven't got the right trees in the right place. So but that will be addressed in the strategy, and let's wait until that comes out. On the question of Voy scooters, I am aware that there is a reply outstanding to Collingwood. Oh, my apologies for that. You mentioned Colin, sorry. But yeah, I will get that. I am chasing that already, so my apologies on that. But for your info.
Just move the microphone a bit nearer, Phil. I think one of them has stopped working, or maybe even that one has.
Okay, let's try this one. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, going back to Voy scooters, they're supposed to know who's riding their scooters at all times. And obviously they don't, because they wouldn't be being prosecuted for failing to provide information. They have been in the magistrates' court on several occasions for failing to provide. If their systems were as good as they tell us they are, they would know who was riding their scooters at all times. So clearly there's issues with VOI that we need to pick up, but hopefully this member briefing on the 11th of October will certainly go a long way to help in providing that information.
Charlie, Stuart, you're going to add some comments, sorry.
Just in regard to the biodiversity net gain, and as the legislation comes in November, already working with developers with applications in the system to see and understand how that works. As Harris has identified, the preference be on, sorry, it's not dialect, apologies, on site and on location. Again, we are working up a document and a strategy that we'll be sharing with members that looks at, well, what is the strategy? Because again, it's not very strategic to look at just what you can do on site. There are other opportunities, I think, that members can look at that picks up many of the points that the member of the public identified in terms of how can we put money together to make the best outcome for our environment as we go forward. So that is in progress, and we'll hopefully share that in as soon as we possibly can. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Stuart. Is that it on this? Thank you very much indeed. The recommendation of section 3 to agree that the report is published and to note its retrospective, not making any new commitments. Can I ask you to confirm your agreement to the recommendations? Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much. I had thought that we might manage to go without a break, but I'll be honest, we've got 7 papers left, and I think we probably could benefit from just 10 minutes away from the coalface, couldn't we? So if we may, so if your watch is, mine says 8 minutes past, I think that's the sort of correct time. Let's see if we can get started at 20 past, shall we? Does that sound good? Thank you very much, everybody. We'll move on next to item 16. This is with Matt. This is assisted technology framework. And on item 16, we then have one speaker. Wendy's gone actually, so we now have no speakers. So Matt, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Won't be long. So this is the renewal and expansion of the assistive technology framework. So West Northamptonshire Council Assistive Technology and Call Care currently supply a range of assistive technology to over 9,000 people across the whole of Northamptonshire per year, supporting them to live more independently. The assistive technology framework enables the team to purchase equipment, which the service then deliver to residents as required and as per their assessed need. Service is currently hosted by the West and will continue to provide the service on behalf of North Northamptonshire until 31st of March 2024, when the service is due to be disaggregated. As a result of the service developments and new partnerships, it's proposed that Northamptonshire Health Foundation Trust, North Northamptonshire Council and both the general hospitals are added to the framework. This strategic move aims to bolster our partners, enhance product delivery efficiency, streamline procurement processes and foster continued development within our partnerships, ultimately leading to improved outcomes for users of the service and increased procurement efficiencies. So I have visited the team with Stuart, I think it was earlier this year, and they're based in the Guildhall, and we were really, really impressed with what they had to say. And, you know, we listened to some of the calls and some of the interactions with people, and it was really, really impressive. So the work of the hub has also been recognised by the Health Service Journal Digital Awards, where they won in the category of improving out of hospital care through digital, and received a high commendation in connecting health and social care through digital. So this service has won very prestigious national recognition. The assistive technology and remote support strategy is appended to the report and is a really good document. And I recommend, if you want to learn a bit more about the service, just have a quick read of it. So as I said, from what I've seen and heard, the service is excellent, and I'm sure as we move forward, there'll be more opportunities to improve people's lives through the use of technology. So I'm very pleased to commend the report to Cabinet and the recommendations at 3.1, Chair.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you very much indeed. Does anybody want to make any other comment or ask any questions on this? It's fairly straightforward, isn't it? No? Okay. In which case, can I ask you to confirm your agreement to the recommendations? Agreed? Thank you very much. We stay with Matt, joint health and wellbeing strategy. This is item 17. After you've introduced it, we have three speakers. That's Councillor Purser, Roberts and Humphreys. Matt, over to you.
Thank you. So this is the West Northamptonshire Health and Wellbeing Strategy, albeit still in draft form for a relatively short period of time. And I hope most of the members in the room are quite familiar with parts of the document. We've had 3 sessions, member sessions, through its development, through the consultation phase, and they've been really well supported. So I thank those colleagues that have turned out to come see the report in its development and have some feed into it. So the strategy has been developed over the last year and sets out at a high level how the West Northamptonshire Health and Wellbeing Board will work to focus on improving the health and wellbeing of West Northamptonshire residents and how we will focus on tackling health inequalities. Members will be aware that the board consists of all system partners, including community and voluntary sector, and also includes Councillor Randall from the opposition. The strategy is focused on the wider determinants of health, and particularly everything the local authority does impacts on health and well-being, including housing, air quality, economy, environment, education, community safety, anti-poverty and social care, and much more. Therefore, the local authority is a major partner and has significant influence. The strategy sits within the umbrella of the Integrated Care Northamptonshire system and shares the 10 Live Your Best Life ambitions. But the West Northamptonshire strategy particularly focuses on how we will deliver at a place level through our local area partnerships and in our communities. The strategy is built from a refresh of the Joint Strategic Needs Assessment in the summer of 22, and there are examples of more detailed work underway to understand need in more detail. For example, children and young people's needs assessment, mental health, substance misuse, etc. There's been extensive engagement during the development of the strategy with different groups For example, parish councils and discussion with all of the community forums, including diverse communities, older people, disabilities forum, LGBTQ+ forums, and the Poverty Truth Commission, which inform the development of how we will achieve the ambitions, including around air quality, transport, and rural communities. Northampton's ABCD community profiles, which summarise priorities for local action, including on community safety, environment, and access to services as well, including Health Watch reports, provided quite a lot of insight into this too. So changes as a result of the consultation, feedback from the consultation resulting in changes in the strategy to highlight ethnic inequalities, air quality, transport, climate change, and older people. Amendments to language are also informed by the consultation responses. During that time, we also had 3 elected member seminars and briefings, which I already mentioned. The draft document came to the Health and Wellbeing Board in July ahead of formal consultation. The formal consultation during August received limited response, but it's evident that these conversations needed to take place in communities rather than online. The richness of this work will strengthen as we go forwards, and a further engagement plan using our asset-based approach. Examples of future engagements to develop ambitions will include engagement with children and young people and the development of youth engagement model working across communities and children and young people teams. Northampton's ongoing community engagement using asset-based community development and extension of this model through the LAPS will also happen, and further development of community forums and VCSE assembly to ensure engagement routes into key communities. Development of research and community champions who will be volunteers who are trained and supported to represent, encourage their communities and provide methods of communication into the communities will also happen. So the next steps, we need to move to delivery now, and I repeatedly mentioned this to Sally that we've done some fantastic work. Now we need to start and see some results on the ground, and the strategy itself has the high level indicators that we are trying to improve, and behind each one we need to move to a delivery plan to start to focus. The board dictates each of its meetings to focus on a particular ambition and brings the voluntary sector and partners in around that thematic session, and they've worked really well at the Health and Wellbeing Board. And this work cuts across every single cabinet member's portfolio, and I'd like to ask that cabinet support the strategy ahead of the West Northamptonshire Health and Wellbeing Board at the end of September. And I'll just say, I think this is fantastic work. You know, we're really lucky. We often talk about challenges facing the council here at these sort of meetings, and I feel really lucky to have public health as my portfolio, and the work we've done, things like the anti-poverty strategy, the work that's included in here around the LAPS, I think is really, really good work, and I'm very proud and pleased to be associated with it. I know, like I say, there are challenges. We all know the challenges with LAPS. We talked about them at scrutiny again last week, but I think we've got a mechanism now. We've got a brilliant strategy, a brilliant plan. We've got a really well-resourced, I'd like to think, public health team that are all focused on delivering against all of our ambitions. So I'm really pleased to commend this to Cabinet. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you very much indeed. Yes, certainly something to be proud of, but as with many of the things we involve other people, it takes longer if you involve lots of people, but you get far better ideas and you get something that everybody's committed to. And I think this is a great example of that, and one of many great things going on in the whole area of public health. Although, as you say, this cuts across all of our areas, doesn't it? Let's go to our speakers now. So first of all, Councillor Purser. Bob?
I wanted to echo some of the comments that Councillor Golby made there. I think this is an excellent piece of work. I think the strategy is essentially correct from our perspective. So I think that's good. Welcome the commitment that he's shown, that you've shown, that the commitment of our Director of Public Health to this as well. I suppose the challenge is that glossy documents don't improve people's health. And I'm afraid even me attending meetings doesn't improve people's health. You know, at the end of the day, it's how do we reduce the rates of COPD in our central area? How do we get people breathing better? What do we need to do to achieve those hard changes that are going to, and that's about, it is about housing. It is about good quality workplaces. It's about dealing with poverty, and it's about air quality and smoking levels. I was out at the weekend and saw piles of cigarette ends outside people's houses, and you think, goodness, we've got a long way to go here. We've got issues with young people. How do we build the foundations of our young people living healthy lifestyles that's going to take them into the future? How do we get people feeling safe in their communities? We've got some really big, hard challenges to actually produce the outcomes that we want, because the strategy is fine. It's how do we deliver it? And that's got to be the challenge for us. So I think, you know, I think in a way, the easy bit's producing the strategy. The difficult bit is actually delivering on it and making sure we get all the other bits in place that we need to do that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Bob. I'm sure we'd all completely agree with everything you just said there. Councillor Roberts, Emma, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Strategies are great, and Matt touched on delivery being the next step. So I know he knows that, so I'm not going to start criticising that this is just another glossy document and we need to deliver. But there were just 3 points really. Ambition 2 talks about education, best available education and learning, and it talks about send children again. In the lap that I sit on, we were asked to look at the health and wellbeing strategy, and I said in that meeting this was a gap and this was a problem here, that we didn't include the send strategy. We didn't talk about linked strategies, and we don't do that anywhere in the document. We certainly don't do it on Ambition 2 page. We don't talk about the linked strategy and the way those strategies are going to run together. So for me, the people who've come to me with concerns have said it's just a token comment, because it doesn't talk about how the departments, the directorates and the strategies will link together to achieve something. So I'd really like us to look at that. It's really the same then on Ambition 4 with the anti-poverty strategy, because we say in there that we realise there are gaps in wage growth and the low pay, etc. But the anti-poverty strategy commits to trying to get all partners across Northamptonshire, West Northamptonshire, to engage in the living wage. But we don't mention that within the strategy, so we don't talk about it here. So we don't link the two strategies enough, in my view. And then I just wanted to point out in the KPIs for access to best education and learning, there's one of the KPIs is the percentage of SEND children electively home educated. I think knowing what we know now, we've got to absolutely look at the numbers of children on EOTAS, the numbers of children on provisional EOTAS, education otherwise than at school, is what that stands for. We've got to look at the number of children with no education provision at the moment when we look at whether or not they're achieving their best life. You know, I don't sit here saying I can do better. What I sit here saying is this is the feedback that I'm getting from the residents who communicate with me and families who communicate with me. And those are the things that I think are missing to enable the current cabinet to make decisions and good and informed ones. So overall, I think, Councillor Gobley's portfolio, public health, the anti-poverty strategy, the work that's gone into all of this should be highly commended, and it clearly is highly commended, but we're just not linking up the strategies together to achieve the best outcomes for people, in my personal view. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. Let's take our last speaker, then I think we'll go back over some of these points, which is Councillor Humphreys. Rosie, over to you.
Thank you. I echo everything that's been said already about delivery, but this really is a very commendable document. Just one thing on photos, I'd really put in a plea to have local photos rather than generic ones. I think that let down our annual report as well, so that there are so many good local photos you could use in the document. Might seem a minor thing, but I think it makes it all more meaningful. There are so many ambitions in this document, we will all support, and I highlight two in particular, just for the sake of brevity. to secure safe spaces for children out of school, I think is absolutely essential, given so many of our children live in completely very toxic environment. So that I think is really important. I'm really pleased to see in the ambition on being fit and well, especially given the statistics we have that 2/3 of our population are overweight or obese, and 1 in 4 West Northants residents are physically inactive, that that active travel is going to be enhanced along with the new transport plan. I would like be interested in clarity as to whether that enhancement is financial or simply more sort of a strategic direction. If money's being put into it, that really is good. I do feel active travel is the sort of golden thread through so many of our interconnecting strategies, sustainability, obviously, anti-poverty in particular, and of course this strategy. I think be as well to look over the border, because Northamptonshire is really ahead of us in what they've done with active travel. For example, they already have a 16-mile green corridor linking villages and towns. I really think West Northamptonshire should have something similar as soon as possible, and it will benefit health, economy, so on so many levels. A quick win, I suggest, for the ambition to keep families out of poverty, in particular the focus with an inequality focus. I was contacted by a young 20-year-old man going to college who has disabilities and therefore has a bus pass, but he can't use it before 9:30 because West Northants only don't extend bus pass use beyond what's sort of statutorily required, unlike some local authorities. And he's looking ahead, and he wrote to me and said, you know what, I need, if I could use that bus pass when I'm going to be working, that's going to, you know, assist my employability. At the moment, I can't afford to pay before 9:30, so I rely on my mum. But he's looking ahead, and I feel that you know, that would be a quick win. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you to all our three speakers there. I thought was some really thought-provoking, valuable observations. Do we want to comment on any of those? Quite a lot there. Matt, is there anything? Stuart, Sally, would you?
Yeah, I'm happy to have a go. Just welcome the points and the observations and the challenges. I would say on Emma's point, just because it's not noted down specifically in the ambition, take the education example, that it doesn't mean to say that it's not there. Beneath those high level outcomes, if you like, there's a whole raft of data that sits between them. And I also would argue that they do read across to the strategies. I think part of the beauty of the work that we're doing now as a whole council is that we're cognizant of all of the read across around, particularly those 10 ambitions around this sort of work. So I would argue that is there. And if you look at the chart on page 30, you can see how that sort of governance and everything else sort of sits across there. But notwithstanding, there are, you know, there are some challenges and always points that we can pick up. Local photos, I agree with that. We should maybe do that if we ever refresh this. But yeah, there's the challenge for me, as I said in my presentation, is that now we've talked about a concept, we've developed a concept, we've got it going, we've got some well-managed resource in there now, and it is about delivery and making a difference. So I'm, like I said at the start, very happy to commend that we I think we note this now, and it goes on to the Health and Wellbeing Board for final approval, Chair. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. I certainly agree with what Bob says. It is about the action. Clearly, the strategy is good to have a thought-out strategy, and also it's a public commitment, isn't it, that you make when you publish a strategy. But accept everything you say, Bob, about that. And linking the strategies, something I might reflect on. But Yeah, the bus, any comment on the bus pass point? There's nothing to say much on that. No, okay, fair enough. Does anybody want to comment on any of the other observations made or raise any of their own issues? Sorry, Fiona, you did signal a minute ago. Didn't mean to forget you. Over to you, Fiona.
Thank you. I just did want to say that although it may not appear in the paperwork here, I work very closely with Matt's portfolio of public health through the education of our children and the lives of our children. We work very closely together on all of those things, and our SEND strategy, which we're about to launch, is also very good. And this will feed in to add to this health and wellbeing strategy that we've got here. And we all do work quite closely together as a cabinet. So I'm happy that we all know what each other are doing well.
Yeah, brilliant. There might be something about whilst we do articulating more specifically the other policies, might there, before this goes final version. Yeah. Yes, okay, well, making those similar comments to those that you've just made. Yes, okay, right, thank you. In which case, I think we're all done. The recommendations are there. Can I ask you just to confirm agreement? Those agreed? Thank you. Takes us on to item 18. This is variation of the public spaces protection and control. Of smoking, we have no speakers on this. To introduce it, we'll throw it out to cabinet discussion. I did feel a little bit like that. Yeah, I think it's just because it's nearly 9 o'clock and we've got 6 items left. Over to you, David.
Thank you. If you're drowning up there, then we're drowning down here, I think, aren't we? So you just, I'll repeat that because Jonathan was slightly gargled or whatever. So it's the variation of the public spaces protection order for dog control and the prohibition of smoking in public places. So this evening, Cabinet's been asked to consider. Here we go. No, I'm back. Surrounded by backups. So we're looking to consider approving the variation of the dog control and prohibition of smoking PSPO, which was introduced in Daventry and the south of West Northamptonshire last year. It also includes an aspect which is that dogs will be kept on leads at all times in Northampton town centre and also in phase 2 of Upton Country Park. I'm sure you've all looked at the maps and seen the huge amount of reports and things. If approved, the order would remain in place until October 2025, and it would provide a West Northamptonshire-wide PSPO relating to dog control and the prohibition of smoking in specific public places. Cigarette butts account for 66% of littered items. So there's one for you, Bob. You just mentioned cigarette ends. And 7 million vapes are thrown away every month. So we've got a huge problem there. 7,000 hospital admissions, 300,000 GP appointments in Northamptonshire alone. So smoking, we need to clearly help reduce the exposure to secondhand smoke and visible smoking, of course, to children. In 2022, we received more than 1,000 complaints about dogs fouling and dog control issues, although we believe it's probably much higher than that. That obviously going unreported. Fouling carries diseases both for humans and livestock, and sadly, the incidence of livestock worrying by dogs is increasing in our area. I think it may be time barred. So I'll move quickly on. So we've had a 4-week consultation which detailed the 13 measures that we're looking to apply. We had 436 responses. I guess the big concern that we've heard a lot about earlier this year was professional dog walkers. as they're operating currently in an unlicensed and unregulated industry. And we plan to investigate the development of a licensing scheme with a view to developing a local scheme if a national scheme is not brought forward by DEFRA. After the tragic death of the dog walker in Surrey, and due to the rising number of dog attacks and human fatalities, sadly, across the UK, DEFRA have been consulting with us and of course all local authorities across the UK. So we're waiting to hear their findings, but we are split sensitive to our local dog walker businesses. So that's a sort of introduction. Thank you.
Jolly good, thank you. So we have no speakers to take. Does anyone want to raise any further issues? Fiona.
I apologise if this is a controversial question, but I just wondered how we were going to monitor these things to catch people doing these things that we've just brought.
We rely on the public to come forward and report them. So, as I said, it's underreported. For us, in order to address a problem, we need to know where the problem is. So I encourage anybody to report.
Thank you, Adam.
Just my thanks to Councillor Smith for his diligence in trying to include an amendment to the PSPO that ultimately we couldn't, which was my request to get a restriction for dog leads on marked sports pitches. Unfortunately, the nature of many of those marked sports pitches and their locations across West Northamptonshire rendered that something that we couldn't deliver in this iteration of the PSPO. Should we be in the same seats in 2025 at the expiry of this current PSPO, I can assure him I'll make the same request at that point in time to protect poor rugby players at the bottom of rucks.
Thanks, Adam. And I think generally, as you say, most dog owners are highly responsible, but there are those that are not as they should be, but perhaps knowing that there's, if you like, this in place would encourage them to behave better. And ultimately, the worst end of the scale, in the event that something still goes wrong, I think it gives more teeth to something like a prosecution if this is in place, doesn't it? So whilst we won't have somebody on duty guarding every recreation field in West Northants, it's still, I think, a really important thing to do. Anybody else have any further comments or questions on it? No, in which case, let's go to the recommendations. If I may, I'll ask you just to confirm your agreement. Agreed? Thank you. And this takes us on to item 19. This one's back with Matt. This is the closure of Boniface House at Brixworth. Once Matt has introduced it, we have two speakers. No, sorry, we just have one now, which is Councillor Harris. Matt, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. So Boniface House, as you just mentioned, is in Brixworth and is a care home operated by us, the council, and has been significantly underoccupied over the last few years, with only 13 residents occupying the 46 spaces currently available in the home. This is due to the outdated design and build of the care home, which meant it no longer provides the much needed facilities to meet the needs of people who require residential care. With no ensuite facilities, the level of privacy to residents is significantly impacted, and there is reduced accessibility for wheelchairs and hoists, which limits the care that can be provided to residents. As a result, we are being asked this evening to consider the proposal to close the care home. As a part of this, the council will support residents to move to alternative residential care accommodation within the local area, providing a suitable environment to meet their individual needs. I just want to make a point of thanking everybody who took part in the consultation survey. It's vital, of course, that we hear the views of those that this decision will impact. And many of the responses acknowledge the need for better facilities and the desire for those who receive care to only move once to minimise them being unsettled. To achieve this, the option for redevelopment of the care home is not viable due to the extent of works needed to take place, meaning residents will have to move during the refurb, then move back later. We have exhausted all options, and the proposal to close Boniface care home has not been an easy one to make. I understand this proposal may cause concern and worry for residents, relatives and our staff, and we will work with them closely through the closure process. It's really important that we are confident in our ability to provide the best care and support to those who use our services services and can continue to do so in the years to come. Unfortunately, the design of the care home may have met the needs of people when it was built, but as these needs have become more complex, the facilities available at Boniface House are no longer suitable, which has caused concerns for us and challenges from the CQC around the environment. This is not something we could ignore, and we absolutely must prioritise delivering the best possible care and support to those who need it. And that includes ensuring the environment enables our colleagues to do this. In discussions with officers throughout this process, I've always made a point of making sure that we can do everything we possibly can to support and minimise the residents in the care home. I have received an email from and a call from Councillor Cecile Irving-Swift, one of the ward members, who commends the consultation process. Said it was very open and she gave her views as part of that. I know Councillor Harris is going to speak to us in a minute. We did see an article in, was it the NN Journal, talking about future use of the building, and of course we're going to evaluate the best use of that. Ultimately, there's a potential for a financial receipt from it, but whether it can be used as a part of the community need, I do know that Brixworth on the whole is pretty well served with community facilities there. And just finally mention the consultation analysis is appended to the report. The quality screening assessment is also there, and also the quality impact assessment. So there's quite a comprehensive set of documents there, but ultimately I'm happy to recommend we go with a recommendation to close the care home, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Matt. Jonathan, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. First and foremost, obviously Boniface House has served the community in Brixworth and around it for the past 40 years or so. Obviously, primary concern are for the existing residents and the plans around the movement of those residents. I'm hoping and I'm sure that the council can assure them and their relatives that that will be done with the utmost care and consideration. It is a huge upheaval for people in that situation. We know that from just looking at history elsewhere. And I hope that consideration is given to where those residents are relocated to make access easy for family and other visitors who might want to still go and see them. It isn't easy to get to some parts of West Northampton from Brixworth. Obviously into town and around town is fairly straightforward, but if you go anywhere else, it becomes much more problematic. Councillor Gobi has already raised one point that concerns, sorry, one other thing I should say is obviously I'm concerned about the staff there also, and I hope that reassurance is correct, that they will be looked after and where possible found alternative employment. So the report 7.1.3 says separate decisions would be taken on the use or disposal of the site if closure is approved. Which sounds encouraging, but then it immediately says it's likely that demolition costs will be incurred, but these would be offset by the value or reuse or disposal of the site. So not entirely an encouraging paragraph. And although Councillor Gobi mentions that there are a fair number of community facilities in Brixworth, the reality is they're actually at bursting point pretty much. So quite a lot of the facilities that we have are used by preschools during weekdays, which fundamentally means there are no go areas for any other requirements from the community. I've raised this issue previously with Stuart L. He's aware of that, and Martin is our executive officer on the rural North LAP, who's also aware of it. And on the council asset list currently, there is absolutely nothing in the rural North LAP area for communities to tap into. So you all know Brixworth is a large community. It's a primary service village, looks after much to do with the surrounding villages. So don't assume that we have got community space, because we really haven't. We're bursting at the seams. So I would encourage further thought about what might happen to the facility. And hopefully we get some assurances that the community will be thought about with regards to this in the future. If I take a quick example on page 293 of the Health and Wellbeing report, it refers to youth offers being developed to provide safe spaces for children out of school. Somewhere of this nature would provide an ideal location for something of that nature. We have a food larder in Brixworth. We have limited space at the village hall because there's only one slot in one day that we can utilise it. So my plea is, please, can we have dialogue about what may or may not happen in the future? My final point really is around what future plans might be for residential care. We know that there is a move much more towards home care, which is a sensible approach and sensible strategy. But I would like to know what plans might look like for future residential care, because there's home care won't be appropriate for everyone. Thank you.
Jonathan, did you want to pick up on some of those points, Matt?
Yeah, sure. Just on the last point first, we have had some conversations about the future of care and what the council's role will be within that. And we're evaluating a couple of potential schemes, but they're still quite in early days, and we've got to do a lot of checking and diligence around some of those. So that's a fair point from Councillor Harris there. Also, I acknowledge the points are made around community facilities. I'll take my own area, Dustin, for example. We've got 2 very good community centres. It's very difficult to get space in them because, you know, to the credit of the community, there's lots and lots of groups, and I'm sure that's the same in Brixworth. So I acknowledge those points. And I've just asked Neil Cox, who wrote the report, who's the Assistant Director for Safeguarding and Wellbeing Services, whether we could just offer a comment on how we're going to work with families and staff of residents in the centre there. Thank you.
Welcome. Neil, over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess just to provide reassurance that from the onset of the public consultation process, we've met with families on behalf of residents, and where appropriate with residents within Boniface House. Completely acknowledge the challenges and potential disruption that such a position sort of causes for residents, families, carers alike, and we've got a good open dialogue with people affected, and we'll work closely with them around what the right option is for their loved ones as they seek alternative accommodation, but also then factoring in any potential challenges around, as you've highlighted, residents being able to visit, because clearly some family members are reaching a point in life where mobility is a challenge for them as well. So yeah, completely acknowledge the points that you're making, but yeah, just to assure you, we've got a well-planned process and some really good positive dialogue with people working through what's obviously a potentially challenging situation in the most positive way.
Thanks, Neil. It's very reassuring. Adam, you wanted to comment?
Yeah, just in response to one of the comments that Councillor Harris made to NN Journal, and the fear or assumption that it may end up being an MPH flat development. You know, MPH do far more than flats. You know, the developments I've seen them undertake are nearly always very sympathetic to the local area, but as far as I'm aware, there haven't been any conversations thus far with MPH or anyone else about the use of this site. As you may expect, in my position as Cabinet Member for Housing, if I see a brownfield site, then I'm going to stick my nose in and ask people to explore the possibility of housing there. But sadly, the leader and Cabinet have yet to give me absolute power over these issues. So there will be discussions with the local community, with local representatives, and you know, I've no idea if the site would even lend itself to housing. So all avenues will be explored, but I think we can, you know, even at this very early stage, you know, probably rule out any prospect of flats being put there, simply because I know the area well. There's the library is right next door, so I visit fairly frequently. You know, it's all 2-story housing in that area. So yeah, flats for me are a non-starter in that particular location, and we'll try and do what's right for Brixworth and for the wider community.
Thank you. Jolly good. Thank you. Anybody else? Any further comments on this one at all? No? Okay. In which case, thank you for everybody who's spoken on this. Just to draw your attention to the recommendations and ask that you confirm your agreement. Is that agreed? Thank you very much. Takes us on to item 20. This is Health Protection Service, Food and Feed Standard Service, Spray Paint Enforcement and the Tobacco Enforcement Plans. This one's with David. David, you have one speaker after you've introduced this report, which is Councillor. It's Councillor Roberts left, so you may not have any speakers. She's gone, Judge. Yeah. So actually, no speakers. David, over to you.
Thank you. Cabinet probably recall this last year. This is a bit of annual housekeeping. So the Food Standards Agency and Health and Safety Executives issue statutory instructions to local authorities, including the requirement of councils to produce service plans for food safety, food and feed standards, and occupational health and safety. And those plans are shown in the appendix A and B. In addition to stating the service aims and objectives, the plan detail the demands on the service and how it will be delivered throughout 23 and 24. Under section 32 of the Clean Neighbourhood, apologies. Under section 32 of the Clean Neighbourhoods and Environment Act 2005, the local weights and measures authority is required to consider the extent to which it is appropriate to carry out a programme of the enforcement of section 54 of the Anti-Social Behaviour Act 2003, which prohibits the sale of aerosol paint containers to people under 16. And then 2.4, the Children and Young Persons Protection from Tobacco Act 1991 requires that the council considers annually and carries out any appropriate programme of enforcement action relating to age-related restricted tobacco controls. Probably the biggest area of concern at the moment with regard to tobacco products is vapes and the way that they're being marketed to children, essentially. One of the sort of gummy bear flavors, what have you. There's been a huge spike in this over the past 18 months, and it's concerning. And we're hoping that central government will bring forward a ban on disposable vapes, but I think we've all got very much a watching brief on vapes, and we've got a planned meeting with all the stakeholders in West Northamptonshire on how we can actually address this on a local basis. But that's a sort of summary to that paper.
Jolly good. Thank you, David. Any questions on this? Any comments or observations? No. As I say, we've no speakers on it, so last chance if nobody has anything else to add. Just draw your attention to the recommendations. Are they agreed? Thank you. That takes us on into item 21. This is procurement of WNC security services. And this one is with Malcolm. And Malcolm, after you've spoken, again, there are no speakers. Over to you.
Thanks, Chair. It's fairly straightforward. It's the putting together of the security elements from the old councils, and we've got until March of next year to come up with this contract. So it's going on the number of options in the report, and option 5 is the figure that is the area that we think is likely to go, but that may change when we start looking into it more deeply. And we would expect there to be some financial savings as well. And that's the size of that report, Chair. Thank you.
Yes, pretty straightforward, really. Anybody, any comments, questions for Malcolm on it? No, okay, thank you. In which case, again, draw your attention to the recommendations. Are they agreed? Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. So our final report then is item 22. This is Coroner Service contractual spend. This one is with Mike. Again, no speakers, Mike, over to you. Might just be, can you try one of the others just for if we still got anybody on YouTube?
Thank you, Chair. This is a very simple report. Members will remember that a couple of full councils ago, we passed a report with our intentions on what we're doing with mortuary services. So this is so that's a long-term ambition. These are the contracts that we need to provide in the short term until we get to that long-term ambition of having our own facility. So very simple report, all the details within it. If anyone doesn't have any questions, feel free to email me. I'm happy to present it tonight.
Jolly good. Thank you, Mike. Anybody any queries, Questions or further comments on this? No, jolly good. Draw your attention to the recommendations. Are they agreed? Fantastic. Well, thank you very much, everybody. That was our last item. I think we've covered a lot of ground today. Thank you to all those who contributed reports, comments, or come along to speak. Just to reassure the taxpayer, any cabinet member who's broken their microphone will be required to pay for it. Thank you very much.